contribute to a much needed broader and deeper understanding of a marginal group and to expounding and addressing manifold pressing interrogations of social justice regarding that group. With the increased international media attention of violent acts of oppression committed on lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender persons, a vital question before the world community today involves the criminalized uh, the inclusion of their rights under our basic human rights, even though homosexuality has been decriminalized, the laws in India remain antagonistic and detrimental today towards the LGBT community in several ways. The LGBT community, though recognized recently, is struggling hard to find a foothold in Indian society. We are indeed privileged to have with us Professor Prashanto Rai, Emeritus Professor in Sociology, Presidency University, Honorary Visiting Professor IDSK. We also have among us Professor Gopa Samanto, Professor Department of Geography, Bardhaman University, former Director UGC HRDC, Bardhaman University. We are pleased to have with us Professor Sutapa Saha, Associate Professor and Head of the Department in English, Surya Sen Mahavidyalaya, Siliguri. In conclusion, it can be rightfully be said that in the Indian subcontinent, individuals belonging to the category of LGBT are still ignored and looked down upon by the common masses and neglected by the administration. Our society does not consider this section of the people as a part of mainstream society. Hence, if these kinds of seminars are more frequently organized, it will be possible that they receive respect, love, acceptance, and recognition from the general public. In the end, I would again like to thank everyone present here. Thank you. Moumita.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for beautifully explaining the necessity of the webinar today. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Piyali Ghosh, our head of the department, to say a few words about the department. Piyali.
Thank you, Moumita. Very good morning to one and all present here. The Department of Geography of Vidyasagar College is one of the oldest departments among the colleges under the University of Calcutta. In 1940-41, the intermediate course in geography was initiated here shortly after the introduction of geography as a subject in University of Calcutta in 1939. The undergraduate course commenced from 1947 and the department started honors course in 1959 under the affiliation of University of Calcutta. Many eminent persons served as teachers of these departments. Afterwards, postgraduate course was initiated in 2009 and in 2015, a research center was initiated. 7 research scholars are working rigorously in this center. Out of them, one has already been awarded PhD and another one has submitted. Thus, Department of Geography in Vidyasagar College is proceeding ahead firmly. Being the HOD of such a glorifying department, it is my immense pleasure to welcome you all to the ICSSR sponsored 2-day national webinar on violation of human rights and related stigma against LGBT in Indian subcontinent. It is an interesting as well as emerging issue of our society. As LGBT people of all ages in all regions of the world suffer from violation of their human rights. Moreover, states often fail to adequately protect LGBT people from discriminatory treatment in the private sphere, including workplace, housing, and healthcare. Hence, on this auspicious occasion, I would like to take this opportunity to extend warm welcome to our Principal Sir, Dr. Gautam Kundu. I extend a great warm welcome to our eminent guest, today's resource persons, Professor Prashant Rai, Emeritus Professor in Sociology, Presidency University, visiting Professor IDSK. I welcome Professor Gopa Samanta Madam, Professor of Department of Geography, University of Burdwan, former directors UGC, HRDC, BU. And I also extend welcome to Professor Sutopa Saha Madam, Associate Professor and Head Department of English, Surya Sen Mahavidyalay, Siliguri. I cordially welcome to our IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Alok Ghosh Chowdhury, our distinguished participants, colleagues, and students. I wholeheartedly welcome all of you once again and wish a grand success of this two-day national level webinar. Thank you. So over to you, Moumita.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. Now I call upon the convener of this webinar, Dr. Tuhin Kanti Ray, to officially start the webinar proceedings. Over to you, Dr. Roy.
Thank you, Moumita. Good morning to all of you. Good morning, respected Principal Sir, Uttam Mukhopadhyay Sir, Anindita Madam, and the resource person present here, Professor Prashant Rai, Professor Gopa Samanta Madam, Professor Sutopa Saha Madam, and Dr. Sheshadri Shekhar Chatterjee, and all my colleagues and other dignitaries. On behalf of the Postgraduate Department of Geography, I am very happy to welcome all of you in the two-day ICSSR sponsored national level webinar on violation of human rights and related social stigma against LGBT in Indian subcontinent, to be held on 30th September and 1st October 2021. Chris Colfer had said, "There is nothing wrong with you. There's a lot wrong with the world you live in. We know the path of journey for queer in Indian society is not so smooth yet. The perception and views of common man to queer identities has started to change little bit, though truly inclusive society is far-reaching. In India, increasing awareness of LGBT rights and LGBT activism only reveals a small part of the diverse challenges faced by the community. LGBT rights has a lot to do, but before we can make the commitment to so do, we need to make this group accepted in our society. This seminar intends to unfold the various issues related with sharing of space with the queer in our society and uh, pave the path towards what it means to be truly inclusive society. Though the topic of the seminar is very much specific and confined, yet I am glad to announce that more than 100 participants registered for the seminar from different subjects other than geography, like psychology, philosophy, and English. This is an indicative that we could reach out of to 100 more people who thinks that this issue must be addressed. I am extremely grateful to the Indian Council of Social Science Research Eastern Regional Center, ICSSR ERC Kolkata, for providing us the opportunity to organize such an event under their sponsorship. I extend my immense gratitude to the college authority not only for giving the permission but also for extending the help whenever needed during the conduction of this webinar. I am indeed honored that distinguished resource person from various fields gave their kind consent to be a part of this two-day program. Their insight about the queer community will broaden our thoughts and open up new dimension in their societal acceptance and concise the discrimination based on gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. I am also thankful to all the participants without whom it would never be possible. I express my sincere gratitude and respect towards all the faculty members of our department without whom the organization of such an event would not be conceivable. Our departmental students and scholars added an essence of togetherness to this virtual platform, and their active participation will be an inspiration for us. I would conclude with the word of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michael Bachelet. It should be, quote unquote, it should be obvious that are many different ways to be a human being. We need to respect and embrace these differences, not criminalize them, not attack people, not deprive them of equal rights of the protection of the law just because they are seen as different. Unquote. I hope this event will give us such an opportunity where all the participants and resource persons from various fields will get the chance to interact with each other and express their views on a topic that is not much discussed yet is of great relevance to our society. Thank you all. It's over to Moumita.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. Now we shall begin with the first plenary session. At the outset, I request the audience to keep your audio and video muted during these sessions, please. Any question or comments must be typed in the Google Meet chat box or the YouTube comment section. These shall be addressed once the respective speakers have completed their lecture. Thank you. Now it's time for our first lecture. I feel privileged to present to you today's first speaker, eminent Professor Prashanto Ray. Professor Prashanto Ray is Professor Emeritus in Sociology, Presidency University, Kolkata, and Honorary Visiting Professor, Institute of Development Studies, Kolkata, India. He was Professor and Head, Department of Political Science, Presidency College, Professor in Charge, Department of Sociology, Presidency College, Guest Faculty Member, Department of Sociology, Calcutta University, Member, Calcutta Research Group, and Member, Working Group on Undergraduate Colleges in India, National Knowledge Commission, 2006. His books include Conflict and the State, an exploration in the behavior of the post-colonial state in India, published in 1991, and Prottoho, Everyday Life Worlds, Dilemmas, Contestations, and Negotiations. His interests relates to the interface of society, politics, and economic models. Today, he shall deliver a special lecture on select issues in amelioration of LGBT predicament. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, I must confess that I do not have an empirical grasp and which spreads throughout the Indian subcontinent. So I wonder who I am fit to speak on this particular theme. What I argue today, and I hope at the end of the lecture you will notice it, is that we need to make enormous strides in liberating the LGBT community, but probably we have not made much headway, and I have an apprehension that many difficulties which are maybe still unnoticed will be on the path to their emancipation. With this particular reservation, I'll make the presentation and say for about 20-25 minutes. And then if you have a serious query, I'll try to respond. The social history of discrimination has an interesting history. It has an universal outline which develops on insights generated by its varied local and temporal manifestations. This outline reveals a collective tendency to disparage the other within quotes, or the so-called outgroup. I'm trying to suggest that LGBT is not the only group which has suffered from this kind of violation, what I call the universal history of social discrimination. For us, the Indians, the best example of disparagement is the Varna order, otherwise known as caste system, which, as you all know, is a hierarchy for arranging peoples. We also know that the word Varna carries a reference to color, outward appearance, exterior form, figure or shape as the basis of the hierarchy. LGBT signifies another form of stratification that is founded on visible physical traits. We need to add color, better to say a hierarchy of colors, some projecting superior status, some less so, some inferior, is reinforced by other attributes, some physical and some psychological, some verifiable and some fictitious. So please understand that the LGBT perception or the perception of the LGBT revolves only around his or her bodily features or their basic sexual orientation. It is added with many more discriminatory attributes, as I said, some of which are verifiable, but some of which are fictitious, imagined. This is true of LGBT or its extended forms, and somebody spoke about it. You may have noticed that the vocabulary of the LGBT has been expanded to include any people within the spectrum of sexuality and gender. It means fundamentally of anyone who is non-heterosexual and non-cisgender. If you are not aware of the word cisgender, CIS-gender, it means basically people whose sex and gender match, which means born male physically and orientations are also male, and there is a match between the two. In the case of the LGBT, sometimes there's a rupture. Hence, we think they're different and then probably argue that they're actually perverse people worthy of discrimination. And I'm trying to argue that this line of thinking is not peculiar only to the LGBT. It was peculiar to the treatment of the blacks by the white, for example, in a racial society, and one can multiply examples. So I'm talking about apprehensions, about these people destigmatizing their existence anytime soon across cultures. The point across cultures is important because, I see, like the working class, it cannot be that it is emancipated in one nation and it remains in bondage in another. So unless throughout the globe, there are competing movements, there are convergent movements to liberate this kind of people, probably the national success will not be a long-living success. As you know, that what is at stake for these people is the denial of life chances, access to work, wages at par with the others, a place to live, right to health, perform in a concert, what is important, without being whispered about or being imagined by the audience, by the outsiders or the onlookers. That is actually the whisper, and being imagined is actually more hurtful, because there is a story behind the whisper and behind the imagination. We need to acknowledge also in this connection that LGBT community is homogeneous in terms of their sexual orientations. What is more important to acknowledge is that they do not have identical enculturation, nor they have identical need for public esteem for their skills. That way, they have their own identities, their own personalities, their own characteristics, and their own experiences. To argue without hurting anybody that discrimination at both the levels must be taken into account and fought against together. Otherwise, there will be no possibility of their secure liberation. I made my initial proposal, so to say, created the mood of the lecture, and I now go to specify what exactly is my apprehension, and I'm trying to argue that this apprehension not easily resolved. The difficulty is to emancipate our habitual way of seeing from our received notions. What I'm trying to argue, that we have to engage with our received notions and from such preconceived notions, so received notions like what we call a transphobia, or we criminalize. This is the received notion about them, and they have become strong within our psyche, and very often we are not aware that the way we examine, see, other people actually are constrained by their inner psychological prejudice. That the others deserve to be branded abnormal and not fit for the same entitlements as you enjoy. As a matter of fact, we think we think we're right about that. We think that they deserve to be treated as abnormal people. They deserve the stigma attributed to them. They deserve to suffer and not to enjoy the kind of rights you enjoy. We built around our preconceived notion a sense of legitimacy, a sense of normality, without examining them. That is what we mean by our habitual way of seeing, which is colored, which is restrained by your inner biases towards such people. And ask yourself, we are all plagued with such bias, if not towards the LGBT, maybe towards any other group we don't consider to be part of our in-group. And as I said, the best example is the caste system, is the caste system in India. And you know that if you scratch yourself, you may discover that inwardly, if you are twice born, you look at the Shudra a little differently. That's true, and we must have courage to acknowledge it. And without this, there is no emancipation. You have heard the argument that in order women to be liberated, men must be liberated first. In the same mold of logic, I'm trying to argue those who are so-called normal people must be first liberated from their sense of normalcy, and then only they will be in a position to help the victims, the LGBT, to come out of their stigma or to share the same kind of rights we enjoy. So I'm trying to argue that there is something fundamental and something usually unnoticed, because for most of the time we do not criticize our own preconceptions. Maybe we are not aware about them also. Where lies the solid foundation of bias towards any outgroup, in this case, in today's case, to the LGBT people? I've made my second round of observation, right? I continue with the argument. On second thought, we all realize that this is not about the normal people and the abnormal people only. This is not like the between the working class and the bourgeoisie, the black and the white, the Jews and their haters, because the issues between transgender and cisgender are embedded in a larger and complex networks of denials and appropriations by a coalition of dominant disparagers along axes of caste, tribal people, religion, occupation, etc. Let me put it again to use a more simple colloquial language to put the message across to you, that I'm trying to argue that the only divide is not between the people with normal sexual orientation and those without. This is not the only divide. In fact, this divide is part of a larger net of divisions within the human community, which means they cross-fertilize, make one discrimination stronger, reinforced. That way, discrimination snowball, and it is no longer confined to the question of sexual orientation. It actually becomes larger. And the larger it becomes, it is more difficult to dismantle this kind of structure, which is based mainly on fiction or prejudiced understanding of facts. So it is not a gender war of another kind. It is part of a larger war against discrimination, and that is what he called the universal history of social discrimination. The LGBT people has joined this particular struggle, and we are afraid that the success may not come much too quickly. If you ask me for a moment that why do you so suspect, then I will say, look at the history of the working class movement. Such a long history, and you'll still find that the workers are still from emancipation. You look at the migrants, you look at the workers in neoliberal capitalism, you'll discover that they continue with the same difficulties they had, let us say, about 200 years back. That is the basis of my cynicism, and I hope that you share it also, because you'll acknowledge that cynicism is a good source to rethink our strategy, because then you acknowledge that everything is not all right, or maybe nothing is all right with regard to the prospect of the LGBT people coming out soon from their restrictive social existence. I hope I carried the message. It is common sense that, like all inequalities, this inequality involves the phenomenon of power of various kinds, either to sustain the system of access and denials of life chances like income, wealth, social esteem, power, and to make the distribution less uneven or to equalize it. Make the point again. No inequality stands only on values, on ideology. You have the necessity of the power to back it up. And you must have noticed that in a Brahminical order, the Brahminical power was supreme which combined to the royal patronage, the king may not have been a Brahmin, and that ensured. Or let us say a case of a dictatorship in politics, you'll once again discover that nothing, no order of discrimination ever remains alive until it can derive the support of the most powerful. The powerful can be the sovereign, the royalty, for example. The powerful can be the liberal democratic state, or it can even be a socialist state. And that way, we have different orders of power which sustain the inequality between these people with normal sexual orientation and people without, the workers and the bourgeoisie, the black and the white. And you can go on illustrating, you'll find throughout human history, it has been discrimination which has run amok to destroy communities and deprive people of their basic rights. I, I hope that you are connecting with this particular tendency. And, we normally consider that liberal democratic state provides greater freedom, which means it contributes to the hope of emancipation or a state of the free market economy. Market always destroys prejudices, which means when you buy, you don't ask the seller about his caste normally. So market has been a great equalizer. Or the modern transport, you enter into a metro and don't ask the caste of the boy who sits just by your side. So, if you have such an economy, such a modern economy, most of the time, without knowing, prejudices begin to die. Further, imagine a society where you have a string of civil society organizations, NGOs, for example, or a critical academia. It is very important to realize that the academicians are playing a part, as we are doing today, in exposing the plight of the LGBT, what I call a critical academia. So if you have a combination of a free market economy, a liberal democratic state, a free media, a strong civil society movement, and a critical academia, I'm trying to argue, even then, it is not adequate enough to liberate the LGBT, and it is better that we acknowledge this particular truth. So the emancipatory process has to be slow. Hence I say my lecture is a cynical lecture. Thank you. I have concluded.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts with all of us today. There are some questions for you. For that, I would like to request Mrs. Anindita Ghosh to conduct the question and answer session. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Moumita, for allowing me to conduct this question answer session. Sir,
Yes.
I have an observation because Jija Ghosh and I am her sister. So we have faced this discrimination from almost eternally, from the time when I was about 7 or 8 and when Jija was born, and when everybody said that she is different, and so they coined her something. So I have a question for you. The LGBT people are afraid to bring out the different orientation. What will be our role as members of this society, which will let these people to open up?
First of all, you must acknowledge that the so-called ourselves, the normal people, we are not identical in terms of our value orientation. Among us, obviously, we have individuals who are progressive, who themselves are emancipated. Only such people probably can sort of stimulate them to come out and talk and talk openly about their difficulties, about their demands, assert their rights. So it has to be a chance. And in most societies, these people are not evenly distributed. We have talked about Jija, and then I will talk about ourselves also. I mean, basically, the teachers then in the Department of Sociology. And Jija was not the only example in our departmental history. And without any dialogue among ourselves, the teachers, we silently agreed that we must listen to them, but then without being crude and asking them straight away, what is your problem? We'd rather keep our eyes and ears open to locate their inner thoughts. Only when they receive such assurance, they begin to talk. But sadly, such people are not evenly distributed in a particular social setting. So somebody has to take the initiative. But I'm trying to argue that the kind of discussions we have today, the kind of media coverage we have today about the LGBT people, they have started sensitizing many. Otherwise, you cannot explain so much of increasing support for their cause.
Yes,
That's
I
a
agree.
positive note. That is a positive thing.
That's a positive.
But that is not adequate, what I'm trying to argue.
Yes, that's not adequate, and we will take a long time for these people to open up, these people to come up freely and say that, see, I am different.
And more importantly, we must also prevent the resurgence of the prejudice. It has happened in history also, right? The research in critical moments of time, then once again we are back to the same story. So it has to be struggle like that. Some success, some failure, more success, less failure. That will be the movement of history.
Moumita Kanjilal, she has a question to you. Sir, as you mentioned, LGBT struggle is one kind of social discrimination within many others. Do you think they face more difficulties than other kinds as it is related to less talked subject of sexuality? Because we have a stigma for
I would say.
sexuality.
Right. See, I mean, but then don't think that they are the only stigmatized persons. Say Jamadars, Mathurs, for example, right? And they had the stigma. See, in Hindu society, which is plagued with the fear of pollution, we've avoided them. My mother would make me take a bath again if I would touch anybody then. You get my point? So don't think that they're the only stigmatized people. But it is indeed true. And I think one great problem is they're not numerous, or there is not adequate count of them. And if you're a small group, everybody tend to bypass you, neglect you, including politicians or those who are in state power. Yes, that is. But then, if you talk about orientation most of the time remains invisible to an outsider. But what is visible, let's say certain bodily practices, the way I walk, for example, that alerts. So the story begins at the level of the body, as I said. But then it's not restricted to the body again. Then you begin to imagine that he must be or she must be an idiot then. You get my point? Basically. I remember one of my students, blind, who used to enter the classroom. As I would begin to lecture, she would just take off the glasses and place his head on his hand as if he was asleep. Trust me, any teacher will become furious. A boy on the front bench, that boy secured first class marks both in undergraduate honors and in the postgraduate results. So this depends on one's capacity for empathy. But sadly, once again, we do not have an equal capacity for empathy. That way, it's a matter of chance. You meet the right kind of man or the right kind of woman, and you're a little forward in your movement. If you meet a bad kind of people, and there are much more, many, then probably it is restraint.
Thank you, sir. We have another question by Piyali Roy Chowdhury. Do you really believe cynicism on the part of normal people may begin to pave the way for accepting the others. Is a change in attitude really possible without any state intervention whatsoever? I think state has already intervened because they have stripped of this IPC 377, which was a criminal law, I think.
But then, whatever state has done has been mainly in the sphere of creating mechanisms and procedures which are not easily accessed by such people. State can create a progressive atmosphere, but then once again, being not numerous, probably the state doesn't react very often. I think everybody should concede that, like feminist movement, which triggered the possibility of a critique of the male state, here also only the civil society drew attention of the state. It became a kind of a pressure group to compel the state to create necessary laws. But then they ended up creating certain mechanisms, certain procedures, and you'll find many argue these are not easily accessible. About accepting others, right? When do I accept somebody who I know to have a different, let us say in this case, sexual orientation? Only when he matches in skill I have, right? See, from this particular segment of population, there are brilliant performers in even Calcutta today.
Yes.
About them, there is no question of rejecting them, right? So until all of them get the opportunity to develop the skills which will make them at par with the so-called normal people, acceptance will not come easily, even if the state forces us or state mentors us to become equal. Had it been so, then India would have been a nearly equal order by this particular time, and we all know it is far from being true. It is only because we need inequality, many of us, and that is why inequality survives all historical progressive movements. LGBT people must be aware about that. They may not go to sleep thinking that our troubles are over for all again, because I think there is a possibility of resurgence of older prejudice very often in all terms of human history.
Sir, we do not have any more questions. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for the wonderful session. Over to Moumita.
Thank you, sir, once again for beautifully addressing our questions. I again request other participants to keep your videos off for better functioning of the webinar. Moving on to next session or next speaker, we have Professor Gopa Shamanto in the next segment. Gopa Shamanto works as professor at the Department of Geography, the University of Bardhaman. She was also in additional charge of director, UGC HRDC, the University of Bardhaman in 2019-20. Her research interests cut across the fields of urban, gender, and water. She has carried out many research projects in Eastern India with interdisciplinary methodologies and collaborative research team under the financial assistance from different national and international institutions such as the ICSSR, Ford Foundation, World Bank, Australia-India Institute, and INR France, IRD France. As a geographer, she has passion for undertaking in-depth and field-based research. She acted as the gender chair of the Paris Sorbonne University, France in 2016. She was visiting fellow at Paris Diderot University, France, Australian National University, Australia, and French Institute of Pondicherry, India. Her first book, Dancing with the River, People and the Life on the Shores of South Asia, has been published from Yale University Press. Her second book, Negotiating Local Terrain in Urban Governance, Freedom and Functioning of Women Councillors in India, is from Springer Local Governance Issues series. Her recent book, Mobilities in India, The Experience of Suburban Rail Commuting, has been published from the Urban Book Series of Springer. She has contributed immensely through publishing journal articles and book chapters. She acts as peer reviewer of articles in academically acclaimed journals. She is dedicated to disseminate the knowledge of social science in general and geography in particular beyond the classroom and academic community. To reach the wider audience, she contributes highly to popular writing in Bengali, the provincial language, through news articles and other popular magazine articles. She is passionate in mentoring PhD students coming from peripheral locations. Today, she will be deliberating on the topic LGBT, othering, and the process of exclusion. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Am I audible? Does the
Yes,
sound
yes,
okay?
ma'am. Yeah, completely.
Yeah, okay. So, thank you very much, this organizer of this conference. Thank you so much because you have chosen this topic, LGBT, and especially from a geography department, because I know I have my experience of working with geography in India, geography department in India, and I know how difficult it is to talk about gender and sexual identities, and how sharing of space becomes so difficult if the gender identity of a person is not cisgender. So I'm from the very beginning, I'm restraining myself to use the term normal, because if we are trying to talk about LGBT, then we first must be careful about, as Professor Rai has already pointed out and explained the term cisgender. So we have to be careful that we don't use the term in normal to define us who are not LGBT. Rather, I prefer the term cisgender to define us who are not LGBT. So I'm really afraid today to speak before you, especially after Professor Prashant Rai. When Tuhin invited me, I had a long talk with Tuhin, and I said no, I cannot speak on this topic because I never worked on this and I don't have much understanding in that field. So I denied first, and afterwards Tuhin succeeded to convince me that I should speak. And probably I was thinking that okay, it is being on the geography department, and probably not many geographers would be willing to talk on LGBT. So I must take this challenge to talk in this forum. So I'm really grateful to this college because they have chosen this topic, and probably that is the way we can contribute as an academic in this field, that we talk about this, we make them visible, we try to speak out that they exist rather than hiding them. So that is the kind of I would say solidarity. We can be part of the movement, we can be part of their support network, and that would be a strategy to speak about these issues which are existing in our societies and communities for such a long time. So I have another observation. I would like to share two of my observations as a speaker in different refresher course and orientation program and talking about gender. I often had to come across the question that, madam, why are you talking about women only? Why are you not talking about LGBTs? And that I have encountered many times, and thereafter, whenever I talk about gender and women, feminist movement and women studies, gender studies in general, then I always, if it is a feminist movement, then it's a different issue. But if I'm going to talk about this gender studies, then always I had to say or apologize before that I'm not going to talk much about LGBT. I'm just talking about cisgender communities and men and women. I'm trying to talk about them. And another thing is that is my once in 2016 I was interviewing Monique Selim, one feminist activist in France, and I was there for a couple of months, and I was talking to her on this aspect, and she was telling me, Gopa, you just see that the way LGBT movement is increasing, I think the feminist movement will have a backlash on this issue. And then I raised the question, why do you think so? And she nicely illustrated that yes, when we think about a feminist movement, we think about injustice based on our gender identity. What LGBT people are doing is the same thing. It's also because they are facing so much of discrimination, they are excluded from the mainstream, they are excluded from the power position, and because of their gender identity. So at one point it will be our difficulty how to bridge the gap between the feminist movement and LGBT movement, and probably for a long time we cannot make a clear split between the two, and we cannot separate them. So that was also a point when I started thinking about LGBT. And also coincidentally, when I'm speaking here, and always we think about that LGBT people, it's a broad amalgamation of things. As Professor Rai has already pointed out, there is lesbian, there is gay, there is bisexual, there is transgender. And you know, always when it starts with lesbian, then patriarchal society might have some problem of putting lesbian first. They say no, it can be GLBT, like gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender. And afterwards, a new term has come, which is more, some people prefer to say LGBTQ, where has become another term, which is a amalgamating term of all these non-cisgender, non-heterosexual identity. So this is a very important phenomena we need to discuss more and more, especially with the students. As Professor Rai has already pointed out, we have to convince our students, okay, you belong to cisgender category, but don't forget, don't try to conceive or perceive these communities as other, as not cisgender. I'm deliberately not using that term, not normal. No, I don't. I think when as soon as we use that term normal and abnormal or non-normal, then we are again in a problematic situation, because we see them that other, and othering is the biggest challenge, as already Professor Rai has pointed out, that this othering is the major hassle they have to face in their lifetime, from different aspects of life. It can be the family, it can be, peer groups, it can be extended family, it can be any other forum like workspace, on transport medium, and everywhere, every walk of life they face so much of discrimination. And I absolutely agree with the argument of Professor Roy that it is not possible to see LGBT movement as one segregated important movement. It is it is like a part of a big war, as he rightly pointed out. It is part of a big war, that the war against all kinds of injustices, against all kinds of inequalities which exist either socially or economically, which exist and over longer time in our part of our historical evolution of civilization. And some people also think that LGBT is a very new phenomena. It was not there before, like Borno Protha or the differences between and religious practices. It is not like that. It is not like a case of Dalit. Yes, it is. It was. It was always. Even in the Vedas, there is a notion of there is mention about these kinds of identities, and especially if we think and we know that all the god and goddesses we worship, these are the conceptualization of human, because during Vedas period probably there was no god, there was no idea of god in a particular form. It was formless. So when we made the forms, then we realized that some are god and goddesses, etc. Then probably there was a notion of something called Ardhanarishwar. And Ardhanarishwar is also a problematic fix that there can be. We could not really have or organized deity like Ardhanarishwar, but the idea was there. And the problem was there that the question of within LGBT, there are many kinds of groups. Some groups are homosexual, and homosexual and transgender, if we try to understand these two, there are differences. There are differences which are very prominent in this case, that transgender people are easily visible and detectable, but homosexuality, no, it is not detectable unless and until they come forward and they say, come on, guys, we are homosexual. We don't belong to cisgender. And we don't like that one single narrative of living life. So there was homosexuality was the practice of homosexuality probably was there. I'm not an historian, so I cannot say in which civilizations we have hints on that, but I'm pretty sure that even in ancient civilization, medieval civilization, there was homosexual practice prevailed in human history. But the problem is here, the thing is, even in Indian society, say for example, if two girls live together, two boys live together, they can be easily identified as good friends. And we do not even question their sexual orientation or identity, because it is not probably a very abnormal situation. But in Western countries, it was always from the very beginning, because no people live together unless and until they are highly connected. Like people, even the grown-up boys and girls, they leave their parents when they grow up. They cross 18 years of age. They go out of their house and they live on their own. So there, even it was not easily possible that the two girls can stay together as good friends without having homosexual relation, or two boys can stay together. So it became more visible, homosexuality became more visible in Western context than it was much afterwards in India, because still there are many homosexual couples who are dared to declare their identity, and they live like that, like good friends. So that covering is possible for homosexuality sometimes, but transgender, no, it is not possible. And transgender, I if I'm sure that definitely this seminar is also, there are participants from students, and if they're students, I rather than I know that it is, if we write a paper in for academic audience, it is very difficult for students to follow. And that's why I always think that as an academic, my priority should be to write something in certain kind of forms that my students can read. And for that, I prefer to write these issues in more popular terms and in Bengali, so that my students, they do not get an escape not to read. So I will be asking the students, because as Professor Rai has already pointed out, that we have to make them visible. That is our priority to do. We have to tell them we are with us. We can provide you support. Just come out and speak out your identity. So for that, we have to generate a lot of sensitivity among our students and among our networks. Because I was also seeing the comment, that what first comment or first question, and to Professor Rai, that what is our role? We have an immense role, because we are privileged to be cisgender. And that is why we have additional responsibility of providing a lot of support, not only to LGBT, but also our activism would be to train our student to be liberal enough, to be sensitive enough, to be empathetic enough to this category called other. So that is very important, and for that I would request my students to read certain books which I have learned about LGBT by reading these books. maybe first I would recommend that Brihon Nalader Jibon Shatto. There is a book written by Minal Kanti Ray, and it is not a novel. It is absolutely ground truth, experienced by the writer and documented. So I would say that there is no book parallel to this, but there is another fascinating book which is in the form of a novel. It is Holde Gola by Shopnaman Chakraborty, and on the basis of that, we have made another film in Bengali. So I think students, if they are comfortable in reading in Bengali, they can try to read these books. And Brihannalader Jibon Shatto was published by Durbar Prakashana. I think Durbar, you know about it. And Holde Golap is also available. So I would request them to read these books, to understand, to develop a basic understanding about what they faces in their life. If we do not understand their problems, their challenges, how they survive, then probably we will not be able to sensitive enough to provide, to think about them, and to give them to do something for them. That is, I think, our responsibility. And I know that there are couple of good movies. There are a couple of good movies made on LGBT community. Because why I am referring these movies and popular Bengali books, because I know that these are easier for students to follow, because they probably may not like to read articulate academic article written in English, and they might be more comfortable to watch a movie and to think about it and to read a book, popular Bengali book. So I would also recommend that, the first movie I can remember, that The Fire by Deepa Mehta. So that was a very important movie made in Indian cinema history, and it was really discussed a lot, like Porma in Bengali. And it was a discussion, and for a quite a long time. And afterwards, many films have been made, like My Brother Nikhil. If you can watch this, all these are old movies, and you can get it in YouTube only. And also, I would try to, there are many, I'm not going to make a list, but I would recommend three: The Fire, the My Brother Nikhil, and the Aligarh. And Aligarh is extraordinarily well, as I found that he's a professor with a homosexual orientation, and it's a wonderful. So Fire, this is the relationship of two housewives. My Brother Nikhil, a young boy, a sports person, having this relationship, which is, again, you can think about Memories on March kind of movie made by Rituparna Ghosh. I will come to that again, because I think that Rituparna Ghosh has, what he has done, he or she, I don't know, probably I should call she, because he changed her gender afterwards. Initially we used to call he, but she changed her gender and became finally a kind of women identity. So that what he has done deliberately, the queering Bengali films. We can say it is a queering Bengali films. So he tried to liberate Bengali films from this, like, এই রাত যদি না শেষ হয় kind of dialogue, that the romantic ideas propagated for so long time in Bengali film, like Uttam Kumar and Soumitra Sen, and etc., many others. So he first realized that we have to break this, we have to queer Bengali film. Like, it is good to have a film which can be a blow to common audience who goes to watch a movie. And it was, initially probably we did not understand well, but later on we understood that it was not just a product of a filmmaker. It was actually an activism of a transgender person who tried, who understood, who felt, and who tried to liberate these communities from the stigma. So I really rate Rituparna Ghosh as not as a Bengali director, but as a pathfinder person who tried to give a blow to Bengali, not only Bengali, but his movies are really appreciated by many other communities in throughout the world. But I take the privilege to call him as Bengali director. So in that case, it was her activism in this process. And I think I would request these students who are present here, they must watch these movies. And there are a lot of other movies in docu film. And I would recommend another movie which is like, first movie where LGBT community were acted, and it was Bengali LGBT movie. It's called Ochena Bondutto by Rishikesh Mondal. It is a docu movie, so it is more realistic, you can say, not like a feature film. And he casted LGBT community themselves. So that is, and this is also the case of Rituparna Ghosh. Rituparna Ghosh tried to started acting, not started, he started before, but very significantly, she started acting when she started this kind of activism of queering Bengali film. So my request would be to the students, you must watch these films. There are other many short films, docu films on LGBT, and I think you should watch this to understand, unless and until we understand the phenomena, how we can act, how we can extend our solidarity, how we can think about, okay, we have to, like, Dalit, as Professor Roy has already pointed out, that LGBT is not one kind of exclusion or othering. There are many, like, he explicitly used the term mathor, that we call them mathor, and that is also a community stigma, and SCs and STs and many other, and Dalit. And in fact, we never realized that Dalit, that very identity in West Bengal, we always think that Dalit is not even identity persist in Bengal. And now we are having a Dalit Sahitya Academy. The first entry, a very bold entry, like Rituparna Ghosh took a bold entry into the world of movies. And similarly, this another entry, Monoranjan Bapari took into the literature, Bengali literature, and he boldly established, yes, we are Dalit, and we faced what Dalit life is, and now I have started to write. It might not be a very good literary piece, but it is a well documented piece. So Monoranjan Bapari's the Chandaler ইতিবৃত্ত, চন্ডাল জীবনের ইতিবৃত্ত, this is also Chandal is another term. Probably we never used Dalit, but we used Chandal. So that is a kind of identity which he provocated and he tried to establish in the literature again. So people are contributing from literature. People are trying to I think that we have a bubble, and the bubble is like somebody has to burst the bubble. And yes, Anindita, I'm sorry, it is written somewhere. When I was checking the films, yes, Nagar Kirtan, and Nagar Kirtan is developed on Holde Gola, So Nagar Kirtan is also an outstanding performance of this Ritik, and also outstanding making of the film by Kaushik Ganguly, and he is extraordinary filmmaker, I would say, in Bengali, and he picks up all these gray layers of society, like that these Bamons and all other identities. I really feel happy about Kaushik, that Kaushik always find these identities and which are other. We are trying to put LGBT again within this other domain. And so I would try to say that how does it feel? We are seeing transgender, we are probably providing solidarity to other, but when our daughters and our sons, they declare that they are homosexual, if a transgender girl or a boy, whatever identity we try to give them, we have in our family, then it's not that easy to have a solidarity for the other LGBT group. And as Anindita has rightly pointed out this about Jia's case, and I would like to share another personal observation. Like my good friend, who is a French one, and she has 4 daughters, and these among these 4 daughters, one of the daughters, she decided just 2 months back, she decided that she would change her identity from a girl to a boy. And my French belongs to, very liberal, culturally advanced French society. And I was having a conversation. When she informed me, we are having a talk over phone, and when she informed me that my daughter wants to be a boy, and for that we have to go through a series of sessions with the doctors and psychiatrist, etc., and counselor and different. They have a very articulated system of because it is their right; they can change at any time. And then I was asking her that, how are you feeling about it? Because when it comes to us, how are you feeling about it? And then she is a very honest person in nature, and she said, yes, Gopa, I'm French. I live in a very liberal society, and we always had solidarity for LGBT people. But even after that, when my daughter told me that she wants to change her identity, it was like a pinch of salt. And I took 2 days to internalize the fact that yes, it is her right to do, and we will provide all sorts of support, and we will try to convince others of my extended family that she is taking a right decision. But mind it, 2 days she took, even being so liberal, so advanced societies. So it's not very easy when it comes to us. Providing solidarity for others is much easier, but still we don't do. That is our problem, that even we don't think about. We can glare them, we can stare them, we can just see them, we can observe them, but we cannot extend our, even thinking about it is okay, it is her or his right to do this. So that is a problematic again for us. And what I would try to extend again of my thought, that how this exclusionary practice on LGBT, or especially transgender, I'm trying to talk about, how it starts. Think about that there is a state surveillance to detect whether the gender given to a newborn baby by the medical science and the doctors and the hospital, is that okay, or there is a problem or subtle cases which probably she or he can be entitled as, she or he can be called as transgender. So we have a state sponsored system of hijra dance. Do you think it is just for fun? No, it is not. It is not for fun. It is not just a custom. It is a state surveillance, because they are certified to go to door and to take a look into the genital part of a child to detect whether there is a case of transgender identity or not. Think about it. And think about if that boy is detected or girl is detected at that moment. And then probably it's not possible that from middle class home a transgender community can come and ask that, okay, give us that child. It is easily possible for the poor. It is easily possible for who are already underprivileged. And that's why these communities, we are seeing that they are clapping and they are asking money by stopping our cars or buses or trains. And we think they are just the other. And how these communities are growing. Communities are growing at the stake of the parents' neglect or parents' attitude of getting rid of these boys and girls. I would say the attitude of getting rid of, very harsh, but it is true. We have to accept. And also, state is also supporting this move. So we have to think about it. We have to rethink. We have to interrogate. We have to be critical academic, like Professor Rai has pointed out. We have to think it critically, not like a hijra dance is just for a fun. These are coming, they're singing and they're dancing and they're making fun of our child. No, it's not the case. It's a state surveillance. So from there, the point starts of a transgender person. Homosexuality comes afterwards. When they grow up, they think that we are trapped in a different body. Probably I behave like a boy and I have a girl body of a woman. And if I think that I'm a man and I'm trapped in a body of a woman, so it's always problematic. But they understand not at the very beginning of their stage. But think about a transgender, and they start at the very beginning of their, after the very beginning of their birth, then peer groups, the school, and then other, and everybody, even the extended family, they look at them at a very different ways. And I would say that the funny thing is, like, my friend's daughter has decided to be a boy. And another thing is, I always have a sensitivity to this community, because when I joined a job and I took a flat on rent to settle there, and I brought my parents from my village, and I hired, and my mother was elderly, so I thought that these probably I can hire a cook. And the first cook of mine was a transgender boy. And he was like, his voice was different, his body gesture was different, and he used to work as a cook, which is again a very Omanly affair. I'm talking about a time, it was 20 years back, it was 1999. It's more than 20 years back in Bardhaman, so it's not Calcutta or a big city. So at that time, probably he was thinking that probably cooking can be a best suited, and he was a wonderful cook. So that was the hassle of transgender people, that they don't find at least transgender, I can say. And also, so these kinds of things, and not only these people face the problem, their families. Anindita was saying this, that it is not only that particular boy or girl or a non-cisgender person, I would say. They are not facing the problem only. The entire family is facing the problem. Who are closer friends, closer, who feels like this is a nice person and I should take care of this person, then they felt the problem. They also felt kind of violence or exclusionary practices among the extended family members and the society and the school, etc. So, and not only that, they are prohibited they are not prohibited, but they are not encouraged in the labor market in different professions. We do not encourage them. If there is a transgender person applying and I have full fit cisgender person, other applicant, I would never recommend a transgender person, even if quality wise or capacity wise he or she is much better than the others. I will try to compromise as a employer to hire a cisgender person than a transgender. So they not only face stigma, they face discrimination in the job market. They face discrimination in banks, in schools, in neighborhoods, in many other places. And still we have many countries where it is seen as a punishable offense. Let's think about in Afghanistan, what will happen to a transgender or homosexual person, where women are in such a position. So these are, it's not only Kabul. You will be amazed to know that there are 77 countries where still it is practiced as a very discriminatory and criminalized offense to belong to a LGBT group. And even if the places where they are not exactly, they are legally permitted. In fact, in India, they are legally permitted. There is no problem if we think about that. Okay, they can also be part of our community. But again, I would say that how many people in India can be protected by legal protection, because it is even within LGBT there are groups, because within LGBT is a group which can be in a very poor community, which can be within a Dalit community, which can be within a Muslim community, which can be in any other places where where patriarchal norms of gender, thinking about gender only men and women, and men are in a subordinate, women are in a subordinate position. So we do not even acknowledge, we do not even, and we have a law, but I have always thought that how law is protecting us. Think about it. In 1986, we have passed our dowry law. And if we think that, yes, these days dowry doesn't matter, but I think still in India, dowry is a problematic issue of so many, and I wouldn't say the dowry death of girls, but or women, I would say it is a dowry death, because it is also killing of, if they're committing suicide, it is not a suicide, it is a killing of in the name of dowry or any other extractive processes. So I would say, yes, we have to fight for the legal rights, but we have to remember that legal rights does not ensure our social removing our social stigma, and doesn't give us give these LGBT groups or Dalits or somebody else. Because if it is so, because Dalits has the similar rights by the Constitution of India, they have the legal rights. We can't say that they are not legally entitled to anything, but they are. So similar is the, if we become very happy with with publication with formulation of a law and passed by Indian Parliament, then we cannot ensure that this law will protect these groups, especially the LGBT queer groups in different parts of the country. I think I have taken more than allotted time, so I must stop here. And thank you very much. I'm sorry for taking more time.
Thank you, ma'am, for this such thought-provoking discussion. Now we have some more questions which will be presented to you by Mrs. Anindita Ghosh. Over to you, ma'am.
Sure.
Thank you, Gopa, for this thought-provoking and very interesting, engrossing discussion. Now, as you see, I have already questioned and you have already answered it, that the students should be, you have said that the students should be made sympathetic to the LGBT people, but what about their parents? Because if you know that your daughter is a homosexual, or if you find out that he is a transgender person, what will be your reaction?
Yeah, but honestly to say, I'm not married and I don't have children. So even if I say I would do this, probably it may be misleading, Anindita, but still I would say, I would declare, I would take that risk of declaring that my daughter is a homosexual, or maybe she is trapped in a different body, so she wants to liberate herself and to want to be boy. I would declare, but again, I don't say it should be my stake, because my mother was a very courageous lady who fought for the entry of the girls into the village secondary school with the village headman 60 years back, and she was a very courageous lady. So probably in the name of my mother, I had to do this. I didn't have a escape.
Now, Moumita had a question. Othering starts at the very core of the family. Do you think support from own families can make homosexuals courageous enough to face the patriarchal society?
I won't say that support from the parents will make their life like, আমরা যেটাকে বলি যে খুব it's like a very comfortable life and hassle free life. No, but at least we need them at the very beginning. If somebody is fighting with the bigger community, like in a neighborhood, extended family, so if they do not get the support from their parents, then how can they fight? So first of all, it is the basic. Parents should parents better accept at the beginning, because if they don't have, like, I have done certain things which I in during my time, probably other girls of my age and my time would not dare to do this, and I did this because of my mother. Because my mother, I knew that my mother will support my endeavor, she will be always with me. So that's why I probably cared. I didn't care about what society will tell me, or I have to follow the social dictates, because I from my own experience I am saying yes. Parents and immediate family support, and thereafter the extended family support makes a lot of difference in the struggle of the lives of LGBT. But it might not be enough, but it should be there.
Now, another question, Debolina also had the same question. LGBT people are generally isolated or discriminated against. But in a country like India, when families are against a so called coming out process, how would workplaces all over become more inclusive of the LGBT community instead of pushing them away? Because in workplaces, we have seen that there is a certain discriminatory attitude. Like, we won't keep engage this person to this particular job, and even if we keep them in this particular job, we have a different type of attitude for these people. How can you explain, and in what way would they be allowed to live and work freely if their identity is different?
It is just as Professor Roy has already pointed out, that we have to see. Yeah, probably he has answered that question before, because we need a liberal government, we need a liberal policymakers, we need a liberal and not biased media, and we need a liberal society to accommodate all kinds of diversities. Because we always try to fit everybody into a model of one structure, and that's the problem. That starts with the problem, like these days we are facing, and he was warning us that there is a high chance of resurging old vices of the society again and again, like we are seeing between Hindus and Muslims in current India. And we are seeing even the Borno Prothas, as it is coming up again, and in becoming a lot of revolutionary activities, and people are again fighting, because we thought that we have overcome after so long years of but now see that no, it is not done. It was just suppressed and covered by something. So I would say that at the beginning, at least we think that parents, I have a very small vision of looking at things rather than seeing the very big picture of how we can convince our government to become no. And even if we think about that, how many women are there in the parliament these days? And if you think about that, how many women are, unless there is a reservation, there is not much women in the situation. So in that country, how can we expect that government will be very empathetic to others? Othering, it's a part of othering. But I think that at the beginning, at least the family, the extended family, and the teachers and the peer groups, they have to be sensitive enough. They have to be sensitive enough of othering. And we need to change certain cultural practices, because the most important, most significant and annoying cultural practices we have in India is staring.
Yes.
We stare a lot, and we don't feel. We stare on somebody and how she or he is feeling. This is a horrible thing. I never understood that we do it, and I also did it unknowingly. And when I visited first in 2004 in Australia and sometime in France, and then I realized that how bad staring is, because nobody stares at the other person. And it's like a violation of human right, staring on others. And we do not care. We do not care on staring. So that staring, we have to be very, very careful. We have to tell our students, we have to encourage our students, do not stare at least. And the staring is a major weapon of othering. So if we have to be very careful about these things. At least we can start our understanding. If we have realized that this is a problem, we try on our own ways, in our own network, as a teacher, as a family member, as if we are having a social position in any other occasion, any other places, we try to use them to be sensitive enough to make other people sensitive. So we do not stare and we do not make other people other. That's my statement.
Actually, here I have an observation, because since I am Jija's sister, I had witnessed this problem of staring, because since she is a spastic child, from the very beginning, when we used to take her in the streets to buy something, or when she is going to some other persons, everybody,
Yeah.
almost everybody used to stare at her, because she is different, and they started making certain comments on her also. But this staring, it's such a derogatory thing. You can, and Jija used to get furious about it, and I said, just ignore. And when you are saying that the staring, you should stop this staring. Now I understand that how you feel when you are being stared at, when the people are staring because you are different, and you just make a shell, and you get inside this shell. Now Tuhin had a question: how can we establish a social bridge between family, institution, and peer to change this critical situation?
If I give a policy prescription, it is not going to change to him. I can only say, as a teacher, as a sensitive person, especially on gender identity, I would say that our limited capacity, we have to be convinced first, because probably we are not convinced that we should not stare on others. We also do sometimes. So unknowingly, because it has become a long cultural practice. So we have to make ourselves sensitive first, not to make other people into the other position, other within bracket, whatever it's a skin color or a bad face, or a different body, different gesture, or different voice, or different way of speaking. That's all. And we marginalize on so many fronts. That becomes an I have certain kind of my skin color was not is relatively in Indian standard, it was fair enough, and I was not from a class relatively Borno Hindu category. So I never felt those problems in my life, but I have faced marginalization on different counts when I was growing up as an academic, and from for being a first generation learner coming from a small city like Baron. So I faced this in my life. So we have to be sensitive enough that we are not going to face other people that they are other. And then we have to convince our family members, our students, and we have to talk about this. We have to say, for example, we can do that. We can watch a movie together, then we can have a discussion. We don't have that luxury. We have just allotted 1 hour class, and we have to speak as much as we can about the syllabus. But we don't have the luxury that we can watch a movie with our students, and then we can have a rigorous discussion on that movie. Probably you can build your own network outside your class, and you can go on doing it. And if we try to do it, I think that things will change. I'm hopeful that things will change one time.
Now, Jhuma has a question. It's quite a different one. Center opposes same-sex marriage in Delhi HC, and Delhi HC says it is not compatible with Indian family unit concept. Madam, what is your opinion about it?
Yeah, I'm very happy, Jhuma, for raising this question. I think one social unit which we can consider as the most discriminatory, most exploitative, that is family. Indian families are notorious in discrimination. They discriminate people on many fronts. They discriminate among boys and girls. They discriminate on sexual preferences. They discriminate on whom you are going to meet, who is your friends. And then we decide, okay, meet with that person, but not with that person. The Indian families are notorious to control the minds and attitudes and behavior of our children without letting them to understand the world on their own. So I I would say that this is a problem again, but I cannot say that okay, break the families. No, I can't, because I have already denied that particular framework of understanding where families, Indian families, I don't have a family. My mother and father was with me, and they passed away, so I don't have really a family, so called. I'm on my own, but I can't ask everybody to be like me. No, this is not this. Probably somebody might feel that this is an escapist attitude. But I would say, like my mother, be in the family, try to change the system, try to change the mindset of the family members. And families are notorious. They have their marriage codes, they have their behavioral code. I was talking with a very intellectually enriched genuine professor, and what he was telling me. He has one daughter, and he's a vegetarian, and he was telling me that I asked my daughter that you can marry anyone, I have no problem, but don't marry a non-vegetarian. Come on. I said, sir, come on, how can you say this to your girl? Again, you are fixing your own vices to your daughter. Why are you doing this, sir? You should not do this. No, and he was laughing and he was saying, we have a long traditional practice, something like that. So Indian families are really, really problematic. I wish that every would have a mother like my mother. Then Indian families would change. And I'm sure there are many. There are many. That's my statement.
Yes, I observed one thing because my mother was also like that. She let me work in Bakura and you know that my first job was in Bakura Sharada Muni College, and she let me go and stay in Bakura and work there. So way about 30 years back. So it was quite a thing for in that time.
Yeah. And it's
And
always
Ishi,
because mother in the family, mother can protect us. Because I had to encounter this question, 25 years back, I was deciding in Bardhaman not to get married, and with my family background. And my mother used to fight. Why she would marry? Give me a reason, good reason to get married. So that was the thing. Family must fight for our kids. I
exactly.
argue that. Yeah.
Ishita had a question. Actually, she has an observation. I personally met a transgender who came to collect money after my second child was born, who spoke so fluently in English that all of us were awestruck. She had a clear opinion of her own and was a pleasure to speak to. But unfortunately, she was moving from house to house collecting money. I want to know your opinion regarding the balancing level of education and work participation amongst the transgender. Because especially within the transgender community, we find that though they are very much educated, they don't get a proper job.
Yeah. So that I was telling that even I have more empathy for transgender than homosexual. That homosexuality is being decided at a later phase, and transgender identity as a child has to face when she or he is not grown up enough to fight her or his. So it is more problematic. Transgender identity is problematic. Ishita, I wish they could their families would fight to keep that girl or boy, whatever is identity she or he is preferring, to keep within the family. But we push them off. So that's why we see these girls who are moving one family to other family to for hijra dance, and they are living on their own by their own way. That's why I'm recommending to read the book Bihonnalar Jibon Satya. That's very important and intrigue book. I read it, I think, 15 years back, and that was eye opening to this LGBT, because I didn't have much idea about what LGBT is. I just see on roads, that's all. That book, and then that book turned my face towards LGBT, to understand the problem of LGBT. So I would say that this again coming to the great Indian which is glamorized and romanticized by the modern state and state government, that family is pushing off these girls or these boys who are not conforming to the gender identity, as we have the binary of women and men. And I would call again them, they don't fit to heterosexual cisgender category. And I would request everyone not to use abnormal, not to use normal for ourselves. At least be sensitive enough not to use those terms when we think about or talk about LGBT. So that's my statement.
Sneha Bhattacharya, she has a question. Ma'am, do you think it's really possible to change a society like India where parents are even ready to reject their child if they came to know that their child belongs to LGBT community? I have seen many people who used to make fun of them even after knowing their daily life problems.
Sneha, it's a very pertinent question. I have no single answer. And I am not a person by nature to give up. Because, if you have seen the episode, the series called Shotomebo Jayate by Amir Khan, you must have seen that one fellow in Rajasthan started to cut a hill, and then everybody everybody told her that he's a mad person. But he took 25 years and cut that mountain piece by piece to make a road to cross it. After watching this, I would request you to watch this and don't give up. You do on your way to even a smaller people, smaller community. If we collectively do it, I think it will change. And society never change overnight. It takes years after years, decades after decades, hundreds of years to change a little bit. It's like a big piece of rock which we are trying to push, and we are unable to push even a single inch. But I don't want to give up. I would request you to watch that episode of Shotomebo Jayate, who dig literally a hill to make a road for the villagers to the other side, which they used to cross 10 kilometers if they cannot pass through that area. And he spent 25 years. So these are real people in India. So how we can be so demoralized that no, nothing will be changed, so we can't do anything? We have to believe that we can change even in a small way, even within a small periphery. But at least when we die, we can be happy about it, that I have done something about something good, and I do not feel guilty. That is my own personal state that I want to share with you. And I hope I could be able to inspire you a little bit, that you try to be sensitive, and don't at least you don't make other people other. That is my request to you.
Thank you, Gopa, very much, because we are also taking a resolution of not othering the people because of their different identity. And with this, I give over to Moumita. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Everyone had excellent questions, and that's why we could have a so nice interaction. Good, lovely. I also learned a lot, especially from Professor Roy's lecture. Yes, sorry, I should stop.
Debolina, please open your microphone. It's closed.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, ma'am, for this engrossing discussion. Now we shall move on to the deliberations of the next speaker, who is Professor Shutapa Saha. Professor Saha is the Associate Professor and Head in the Department of English in Uttam Mukhopadhyay. She also happens to be the convener of the Women's Cell in her college. She's a translator, regularly writes in little magazines and literary journals, also contributes articles in newspapers. Today, she shall be enlightening us on what's the way forward. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Professor Debolina. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm a bit apprehensive here because the sky is overcast in this part of Bengal, and I have practically no network. And I have got inside the meeting room through my mobile hotspot. So would it be all right if I keep my video off and then talk for better transmission? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And my heartfelt gratitude and thanks to Principal Dr. Gautam Kundu, Professor Uttam Mukhopadhyay, Dr. Piyali Ghosh, Head of the Department of Geography, Convener of this webinar, Dr. Tuhin Kanti Ray, and Department of Geography and IQAC as a whole of Vidyasagar College for offering me the opportunity to share my views with the august audience present here on this platform today. And just now we have listened to two very interesting and enriching deliberations by Professor Prashanto Ray and Professor Gopal Samanto. And now my reflections will be in the capacity of an aware citizen, a sensible human being, and probably as an ally to the cause. All of us, we know that the very idea of human rights, it rests on the central premise that all humans rather have dignity, and all humans should be treated as equal. And anything that undermines that dignity is a violation and paves the way for discrimination. And in our own constitution, we are told about, equality, social, economic, political equality, and equal status for all. And we are also told about the protection of law, which is guaranteed for all. But one thing we must notice, that still even after this, starting from 1861 till 2018, a practice still remains, which was criminalized under colonial era legislation, and it took almost 157 years to be repealed. And the judgment on consensual same-sex relationship now has got considered a landmark in constitutional rights and in empowering a community. And this signaling by the court that it was on the side of the queer community is a positive force, no doubt. And entitling a queer person to the full protection of laws without any discrimination also has helped lay the foundation for future challenges. There is also no doubt about it. But look at India. India is a vast country. So attitude towards LGBT individuals also vary and vary vastly. The disparity between urban and rural India, language, caste, class, religion, community, all these add further complexities to understanding this whole issue more fully. That is why the welcome victory after repealing the previous act, the British Imperial Act, this was a welcome victory. And after the judgment, it does not necessarily mean that LGBT people in India are fully free or perceived as equal among their fellow citizens. No, it is not. It rather underscores how much work remains to be done in India, or even in the rest of the world maybe, to overturn this anti-gay attitude. And here is one report which I found, which was made by UNESCO, and it was a research made by UNESCO, and this research was focused on youth and school environments in India, and where it was found that educational and training opportunities, are still often denied to LGBTQ community. And that's why maybe many of them, just now we were talking about transgenders, and they are still moving from door to door to support themselves. Lots of harassment and bullying still are going on. And there are gender-specific school uniforms. This is something new which I came across. Even lack of access to toilets because of their gender identity. And sometimes teachers, they are beating and berating male students for acting too effeminately, and then forcing transgender students to sit separately from their peers. That is another practice. And this kind of bullying and harassing, they're causing many school dropouts. So protections of rights, when we talk about it for LGBTQ community, transgender persons, still does not allow self-determination of transgender status. So it does not offer the reservations in public employment, education, housing, or healthcare. And still the laws are very prejudicial in several ways. Although the same-sex couples now have the legal right to cohabit and conduct their personal affairs without any fear of persecution, so that fear of persecution is not there. But still, there is no recognition of, same-sex marriages. I mean, if they are supposed to lead a life, how are they going to do so? Because there is no recognition of same-sex marriages, no rights for adoption, or even no rights for surrogacy. So the actual problem is more than the fact that the law does not recognize a relationship, but the fact that the sanction of a relationship that should be accorded by the society is not available. So I personally feel that change must take place at a societal level, and then it can be complemented by a law. So the LGBTQ individuals, what we can see that they are still denied the equality of treatment in various ways. For them, a truly inclusive and equal society still remains a distant dream. The main reason is that within the boundaries of family, home, and school, it still remains a constant struggle. Families and society in rural and urban India have their own ways of dealing with LGBT individuals, where we find that secret honor killings are planned. We find that lesbian women are subjected to family-sanctioned corrective rapes, often perpetrated by their own family members. And sometimes it is found that the village medics, the quacks, they often prescribe rape to cure lesbians of homosexuality. And if they refuse to marry, this refusal to marry brings more physical abuse. So danger to queer people in India is from their own families. One of the major factors that results in the stigmatization of LGBT people is parental reaction. They are generally acceptable to family only if they agree to behave like cisgenders. And in a society bound by a rigid set of social and cultural norms that dictate the terms and conditions of education, career, relationship, marriage, etc., unlearning and undoing overnight seem difficult. Many LGBT people decide to succumb to the pressure to act like straight people and marry. And in order to escape this, many lesbian women, they even request the activists or the NGOs or the local people to find gay men who would be ready to put up with a show of marriage. And our society finds so much fun apart from this, in rampant telling of homophobic jokes, joking about gay people's mannerisms and behavior, staring, just now we have discussed it. And such behaviors actually costs us our freedom and dignity. We, the educated citizens, theoretically, most of us support alternative sexualities and gender non-conforming identities and LGBTQ issues. But when it comes to day-to-day behavior, there is an urgent need to change the ground reality. That is, bridging the gap between academic knowledge and everyday experience. So we talk about gay people's coming out, but coming out should not have to be this big event. Straight people don't exactly sit their parents down and announce it to them. We don't have to do it. People should simply be happy that someone has found a person, a partner who makes, or a companion who makes you happy. So that should be the most normal thing in the world. And here parents and teachers should be mostly aware, because parents and teachers, they have to promote the acceptance of diversity, create awareness programs for stakeholders such as educational institutions, judiciary, police, political, those people who are in political power, then healthcare workers. And teachers should reach out to parents, sensitize students and parents both, to ensure supportive families. So by accepting your child's identity, you are helping create a better society and value diversity and also uniqueness of people as they are. So today's youth are, I think, much more open to listening and accepting alternative identities, and they are able to open up about such issues, such very deeply personal issues. And the change is taking root, that we must say. Young generations, they have to question and learn from debates. They should know about certain legal frameworks, simple laws, simple legal concepts, and we need to talk about everything with them, like transgender bill. We need to talk about Section 377 with them and other aspects relating to this issue. So far, we have seen that the greatest positive change has been in bringing the issue of sexuality and queerness into the public domain, into the public space for discussion, and that is a very positive note. So we have done it, we are doing it, but still I think we have a long way to go. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for highlighting this topic and sharing your thoughts with all of us today. If there are any questions,
Yes.
I would request Mrs. Anindita Ghosh to conduct this session.
Thank you, Dr. Saha, for this wonderful and informative lecture. Now, I have a question to you. That laws are always made when the society wishes it. What is your opinion about the stand the society has taken about these queer people? Because you have said that when we know that our daughter is a homosexual, we try to correct these people. I personally know a person who has gone to a psychologist, who has taken her daughter to a psychologist because she thought that her daughter is having a serious mental health sorted problem and that should be sorted. Now, what in your opinion should be the attitude of the society so that this problem could be solved and we can urge the state to make the marriage of these homosexual people legal so that they can at least live with the desired companion and they can adopt children if they want to?
Okay, thank you for your question. And I think I just now have talked about it a little bit. Actually, whenever you will find that there is a set of rules which has been framed by society, and the moment you try to, move away from it, out of the box, your orientation which is out of the box, then it is considered to be some kind of transgression, and society thinks these transgressions are punishable or they are to be corrected. So hence we find that, I mean, in case of transgenders or homosexuals, or people who are actually not cisgenders, I mean, society takes a kind of corrective measures for them, some kind of conversion therapy. I mean, the moment a child is born as transgender, which can be detected, the doctors immediately take steps to uh, to change its sex, which fits that set of norms, which was framed by society. But let the child grow, let it grow to an adult, and then let him or her decide that whether he or she wants to change herself or himself to another identity or to that set of norms. So, I mean, one should have the liberty to do so after growing up. But society should not force one child, to fit, which will match the set of norms which has been framed by the society. And I would like to quote a few words which I am borrowing from one very well-known American poet, Audre Lorde, who was a black woman, who was a feminist, and who was a lesbian, and she was bringing up her two children. One was 15 years old and the other 14 years, and she's saying, I'm quoting her, that she's saying, most likely there will always be women or men who move with women, women who live with men, men who choose men. I work for a time when women with women, women with men with men, all shared the work of a world that does not barter bread or sell for obedience, nor beauty, nor love. And in that world, we will raise our children free to choose how best to fulfill themselves. So we must accept as we are. I mean, who are not conforming to that set standards of society. So let us accept as they are. I mean, as a mother, sometimes I feel, I have a son and a daughter who are adults and grown up, and I feel sometimes that if some of them comes to me and tell me that I want to marry, if my son comes to me and tells me that I want to marry another boy and I'm in love with him, and then I ask myself that how am I going to react to that? So I think within the society and within the family, we must individually have a kind of dialogue with oneself, because ignorance cannot serve the purpose. Ignorance cannot solve the problem. So all of us, we have to have some kind of dialogue with ourselves that, okay, how am I going to react to it? I'm not ignorant. So it's what is the best option for me if this is happening in my personal life. So it's the best option is to accept the way a person is.
Yes, I think the best option is to accept the way a person is. But in our society, it's very difficult to accept this norms and this reality.
Of course. Society cannot be changed overnight. So it has to be gradual. We are happy that this kind of discussion, it has come out to the public domain, and now we are having discussions in the open forum, which is very important. And it should be there more and more. We should talk to our students, we should talk to our children, we should talk within the family and without the family. So there should be more debates, more discussions regarding these issues, so we can move out of the taboos.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Saha, for this lecture, and this encouraging lecture, I should say. We have another question from Ishita Boral. How would you address the issues related with third gender in your institutional framework?
See, I mean, Supreme Court created the third gender status for transgenders, and I mean, I think it's a welcome decision that earlier they were forced to describe themselves as either male or female, but because there was no recognition of their identities. But now the conflict to some extent is over, because now I think you can write third gender instead of male or female. I mean, in my institution, I do not know. I mean, only I met once a student who was supposed to be a male, but then he had some, what to say, he had some traits of female within him. But, you know, just now we have talked about staring, and I never noticed the other students, you know, his peers or his friends, staring at him so much. But we old people, we used to gape at him sometimes because of his quirky attitudes and quirky style, you know, so which used to attract us, and sometimes we used to gape at him and stare at him, which we knew that wasn't good for us. But what I have noticed, that his peers or his friends never used to bother about it. I wouldn't say that there was a kind of cynicism, but they were okay with it. They were quite normal with it, and which seemed to be quite, quite good for me. I mean, that is to be appreciated. I mean, as I was telling you, that the young generation today, they are more open to this kind of things than most of us, the old people. So I haven't come across such issues, I mean, such experiences much in my college teaching. But once I had come across, and that's what I noticed.
Yes, actually, it is encouraging that these young generation, they are accepting these people much more than we do. And this is certainly encouraging, because they are the persons who will carry on our society. And I think that the societal...
Yes, actually, we are more conventional and traditional in our own ways. But this young generation, they are not, you know?
Yes.
I mean, they are much ahead of us. So things which seem to be very difficult for us is not that difficult for us. We think that they wouldn't understand, but they will understand even better than us. And they are more, I mean, they can accept the reality even more than us. I mean, this is not a problem that we are going to find a solution of this problem, but this is a reality, and for which we have to change our attitude and approach. That is most important.
Thank you, Dr. Saha, for this lecture. And I'm giving over Debolina. So please, Debolina, please.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Saha. Now we shall be going ahead into the technical session scheduled for today. Our first technical session shall have Professor Shutapa Saha as the chairperson. There are 3 participants for this session. We shall have the interactive session, that is the question answer session, once the 3 presentations are over. So I request the participants, the audience, and everybody else to kindly type their questions in the Google Meet chat box. So without much further ado, I request the first presenter, Dr. Tuhin Kanti Ray, to go ahead with his presentation. The title of his paper is In Search of Urban Queer Spaces, a study on Kolkata. Over to you, Dr. Kanti Ray.
Okay, thank you. I would like to share my screen first. First of all, I would like to know, am I audible, and is my presentation is visible?
Yes,
yes, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, all. It's first of all, I would like to say that it's a pleasure that today I have given a chance to present my I won't say paper, but experiences which I have with the people with whom I have interacted who are from LGBTQ community. And it's a very special occasion for me because I'm an alumni of this college, Vidyasagar College, and it's a privilege and it's an honor for me that today I'm having this opportunity. So first of all, I would like to say good afternoon, Honorable Chairperson, and all my teachers and all the other respected person who are joined here. So my paper is, or my what I want to share, it's like in search of urban queer spaces, a study on Kolkata, mainly the various wards of Kolkata, Kolkata metropolitan area, I would say. Now, is it visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Yes, sir.
It is very much visible. Yes.
Yes, yes. So first of all, what I'm saying that queer, in our previous talks also, the word queer, like came up so many times. But the thing is, if we Google the term queer, it says that it's a word, it's a capping word, it's an umbrella word that describes that like the sexual and gender identity other than the so-called straight or cisgender, or means the queer term is very much denoted, queer term is used for denoting the lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people. But if you go for the literal meaning of the word queer, then it says it means weird or strange or unusual. These kind of synonyms are given to the word queer. And the first of all, I have a bit problem with that word. It makes me a bit uncomfortable that how much it is justifiable to really designate this kind of word to a human community, that they are weird, they are something to look at or stared at. If we continue to use this kind of words like weird or strange, then it will become very obvious that we will stare at them because we are looking something which is weird, which is very strange. So it is common human nature that we generally look at the weird or strange thing. So first of all, I think we need to change our day-to-day vocabulary whenever we are talking about, because we should know, we should first learn that whatever may be somebody's sexual identity or sexual preferences, they are human beings first. If they are also fellow human beings. So they are not weird, they are not strange. They can be different. We are all different from each other, and they are also different. That thing, I think that would be a better point. Just look at this picture that the boy in wearing a Punjab, like you think where he's known to me, he's in a pride parade, and look at the choices of words, Dalit, queer. And then they said that they are proud, but they quoted these two words at the same platform. Dalit means quite untouchables. And this is a reality. This is, look at these people. I don't think they look weird or they look strange. They're just looking like any of us. Now, from where it comes, I think that queer or they're strange, they're odd, because we have a concept of forceful heteronormativity. That is a norm, that heterosexuality, it is the norm of the society. That a boy has to make love, or a boy has the sexual preference for a girl only, or if a person is a girl, sexually female, then she must have the preference of a boy or a man. This form of heteronormativity, that there is a belief that heterosexuality is normal and is preferred orientation. And that makes all these things very difficult. And it is nothing but a very kind of, and it builds up a power relation. It overtakes everything. It overtakes the basic concept of humanity, this concept of heteronormativity, while we can say that when we are like theorizing the queer theories of in like according to the Judith Butler or Michel Foucault, they are saying Judith Butler once said very interestingly that the concept of heteronormativity or concept of heterosexuality is very much dependent on the concept of homosexuality. It's like the existence of white is there because there is something called black. So he said that the concept of heterosexuality is very much there because there is a concept of homosexuality, and that is why on the basis of homosexuality, we are marginalizing that gay, lesbian, and transgender people and saying them queer, and we are marginalizing them. And that is why heteronormativity is gaining its power from this gender binary concept, from this concept of gender binary, that there will be two genders only. Now, from where it comes, the gender binary? It comes from the concept of, first of all, the concept of visibility. We look at a person first, then we talk, and then we go for the minute details, how he walks or how he talks, but we look at them. So our society decided, society biologically also, we come with a form, physical form. That visibility, that is called our like, that is called sexuality, the sex. But the orientation in this picture, you can see that the orientation has nothing to do with your appearance. Means your sexual preference has absolutely nothing to do with your biological sexual identity. And whenever we are talking about the gender identity, we must know that is a social construct. There is a difference between sex, sexual identity, and the gender identity. Gender identity is some roles which are attributed, sometimes forcefully attributed by the society. That if you are a boy, you have to take a ball, go outside and play. If you are a girl, you will take a doll and be inside in the four walls of home, and you will play with it. That means from the very beginning, from the childhood, our gender identity gives us the role that open air, open space is for the boys and the four walls is for the girls. And if you're transgender, then the problem arises far behind, that you will be, tangled between home and the field, where to be. The crisis generates from the very beginning, beginning of childhood, because of their preference. Okay, so what I think that sex cannot be the determinant of gender and sexuality. No, there cannot be a flow. There is discontinuity and incoherence there. This kind of thinking is very incoherent. The binary thinking, heterosexuality depends on the concept of homosexuality that I told earlier, and that generates a hierarchy of power structure. That is the suppressing the identities of the gay, lesbian, and transgender people. That starts from the family. And in metropolitan city like Kolkata, I'm going to share my experience that I have interacted almost 46 people who belong to this LGBTQ community, and I have come to some conclusions that they all belong to the very much metropolitan wards of Kolkata. They are quite educated, their family background also quite well off, but there is also always there is a tendency of suppression of their actual identity, means actual orientation. It is the visibility is getting always the preference. And if you have a turmoil or conflict between the visibility and your orientation, then society in the form of family or in the form of peer group, they are always upholding your sexual identity, suppressing your actual orientation, means they're upholding your body, suppressing your heart. Now, the concept of gender space I want to just depict here. These are all some pictures which are published in the leading daily newspapers. From this, you can get the concept of gender space, that the spaces are very much restrictive for or very much given prioritize to some gender. Like whenever we are thinking of kitchen, there has to be a symbol of women. women symbolizes the kitchen. And there's a very famous picture which is published that after lockdown, there are like huge queues in front of the liquor shops. I'm not going with the, restrictions on all, but look at this picture. There are all males. They're all males. But the picture which got viral, which went viral, and it is published in that Statesman, and it went viral. A woman is holding a bottle of liquor, and it says in this caption, not just men, but fair number of women are seen among the buyers. I don't think that it is a matter of highlight. A woman can buy liquor. They can consume and they can buy it. But no, in our society, some special restrictions are there. That is why a leading newspaper like Statesman is using that kind of gender bias approach while highlighting the news. And so if we are discriminating that much in this binary of gender, so you can think that when we are going to break the gender binary,
sorry for interruption, please change the slide, otherwise we can't see.
Okay, is it the still you are seeing the first slide?
Yes,
First slide.
Okay.
The slides were there on one side of the screen, but the slides were not coming to the full screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me share it again. Ma'am, is it visible now?
Yes, it is visible now.
Now you can
I
see
think you can do one thing. You can make the slideshow work. So then the other things will be removed.
Ma'am, can you see the slide that called gender space?
Yes, we can see.
Yes. Now.
Okay. Now I'm just talking about this photograph which went viral. That women is buying liquor, which is quite normal, but our leading daily like Statesman, they are highlighting this kind of things, like the concept of gender spaces like that. Now just I want to come to my experience that I have talked and I have interacted with almost 46 people on social media, and and few of them I met physically, and they have the orientation that is gay, lesbian, or transgender. That in terms of gay, there are 17 people I have met, and I've interviewed them. They said that out of them, 8 of them out of 17 are claimed that they went vocal about their sexual preferences to the family and to the society and to the peer groups also, and 9 out of them are not. In case of lesbian, only three girls are there. And I want to say that for the gay and lesbian, their age group is from 25 to 40, and for the transgender, I have taken the age group from 14 to it is 22, I think. Yes, 14 to 22. So for the lesbian, we can see that the claim, being vocal about the gender issue is very less. They by themselves or under the family pressure, they have suppressed their presentation, and they're not get enough encouragement to be vocal about their thing. But the horrible thing is that there are like 15 transgender. Out of 8 of them, their family know that they are transgenders, and they also can feel and they know that they are transgender, but they are forcefully getting suppressed to tell the others that they are transgender. It is quite painful, and their experiences were horrible. How they are fighting with their actual identity. They have to fight their mind, they have to fight with their body, but they are not allowed. And in all of the cases, the thing is, their pressure coming from that what will be the impact on their pride of their family. It's a matter of their pride of the family. It's a matter of the honor of the family. So it is very horrible that, it's very difficult to hide the identity of the transgender. But in my experience, I know, most of the people in my experience I have interviewed, they have suppressed their identity. In a virtual medium, sometimes they open up, but in reality, maximum of them, they are not claiming that. And now I'm coming the abuse in family, which is a very horrible thing. That family is not supporting. First of all, family is trying to suppress, but family is abusing them also for their attitude, for the way they talk, for the way they look, for their preferences. Look that out of 17, 13 gay people was abused by their own family members, and lesbians also abused. And it's maximum number of lesbians, they are abused verbally or sometimes physically. That why they look like masculine, why they behave like in certain ways, this is not very much done thing. So, and all the transgender, in case of transgender, they are all abused. They're all abused on the basis of their physicality, how they walk, how they talk, and why they are not, after a certain point of time, people, start abusing them. Why are not they are not in the relationship with another girl or another boy? And for the gay and lesbian people, they have the problem that after a certain point of time, everybody is raising the question of marriage. Why don't they getting marriage? Why not getting marriage? This is the case of the private space, the family space, and in the public space also, they have to go through abusive comments, like bullying, like using filthy language to them. And there are some urban slangs also, which I don't know that, when the boy is a bit girly or effeminate, they walk in a certain way. They used to, pass the comment that red lip chick or muscular babe. These kind of urban slangs are being used to the gay and lesbian people. And in case of physical harassment, in the year of 2019, it's according to Lal Bazar police, that 34 cases were registered in Kolkata where the physical abuse have been done in the public place with the LGBTQ community people. 34 cases. And on a brighter side, it's a very bad thing to do, but on a brighter side, it is quite unimaginable. 5 years before that, people are coming out and they are reporting in local police stations, but it is, the things are changing, at least I can say that. And ultimate exclusion, that there is Saha for Equality, it is an NGO which is working for the LGBT community. They have said that every year on an average, 20 to 30 people leave their workplace due to the humiliation they have regarding their attitude, physicality, sexual preferences. Especially in the IT sector and all, on an average, they count that 20 to 30 people just move out from the LGBT community. They move out from their places, and there are some real issues I want to address. That out of that 46 samples or 46 people, and they have faced the physical abuse in the public space also. We can see that, verbal abuse in public space. Maximum gay people have faced the verbal abuse, and for the lesbian, it is physical abuse is more. And the transgender, all of them have both verbal and the physical abuse on the public space. It's a very alarming situation. And as we can see that the public space harassment is mainly, coming from the workplace. If you look at the data breakup, mainly coming from the workplace. And some of them are harassed in both general public space, like in a shopping mall or in their locality while they are working or going somewhere, and in their workplace also. This situation is very alarming because it is a matter of bread and butter. Quitting the job can make them financially very unstable. So it is not possible for them. And for year after year, there are so many people who are continuously, facing those kind of humiliations. Okay. Now, with the impact of that, they are forced to accept that heteronormativity that I have talked, that out of 15 transgender people who are being interviewed, like 10 are assigned as male and 5 are assigned as female in their voter card. Out of pressure. Out of 8 claimed gay person, 5 of them are forcefully married with girls. All of the 3 claimed lesbian person, they are forcefully married, and 2 of them having children also. And out of 20 non-claimed gay and lesbian person, 14 of them stated that they themselves believe they have to fit in the social gender binary. This is something very unfortunate, that our society made that consensus that they themselves believe that it is impossible to be vocal to the society. They also believe that they have to fit in whatever way it is, they have to fit in. So this is, the mental construct we have. But on a brighter note, these are some pictures that on a brighter note we are having now some gender sensitive public spaces where is a toilet, the public toilet in Kalighat area. You can find where there is provision for the transgender, and it is like the picture of South City Mall. A few years before, when I used to go there, there are 2 entrances. One is for male and another is for female. But in last week when I went there, I saw, it's very good to see there is only 1 entrance. That is, we are going gender neutral in some way. That is very much needed. Otherwise, if we are always putting those tags, this is for male, this is for female. So this kind of thing also, make that sense of gender binary more and more concrete. So these are some, these small steps, I think, but things are changing. Now, when I have talked with those 46 people and too many more, and they always say that for recreation, they always go to the Nandon Rabnusadon area. This is their only recreational space. So just with this map, I just want to show that, the Kolkata is a big city, and they have that special restriction for recreation only. And they actually said that, going to that space, every weekend they went, and all the community people comes there. They feel a sense of community feeling. They feel a sense of togetherness. They feel that like-mindedness and the sense of security they face. They feel that here nobody from the other, orientation will come and, do some bullying to them. So, this kind of spatial restriction is there. For the recreational purpose, they have to go only that, very small piece of area that is from the Birla Planetarium and to Rabnusadon Nandon area. This is their very much, labeled recreational space for the weekend. They used to go, and, there are some people, they told me that for last 2 or 3 years, they're doing that on a regular basis. These are the special restrictions. And we know, I think it's a known fact for them that for last up to 30 years, there is enclave, residential segregation for LGBT community in Kolkata in Dhakuria. There are more than 50 apartments are there, which is resided by, especially for the LGBT community. And they, it is a norm right now. It's a small enclave you can find there. If you go, you can visit those areas, and if you have some known people from that space. So it's a very known fact that this area is known for the residential place for the LGBT community. And while we are, getting those kind of special restriction and social rejection, so we build up some kind of subculture, which is not mainstream. The LGBTQ people have, developed some kind of subculture, like dress codes, different dress code. They have some parallel vocabulary. When they, talk to each other, they use this kind of parallel vocabulary. They now they are organizing Pride Parade, which is very known thing, but it is not a matter of purely popular culture. They are organizing cultural programs only for themselves. And yes, they have some technological virtual spaces are there. Some apps are there where they can find their people from own community, and they can meet them and ended up, dating or, getting some people, and they can just meet together. Okay. So now there are some organization which I personally, interacted with, and they're bringing some light and working for those people like Plus Kolkata, Shati, Sappho for Equality, Rainbow Club, Pink Party, and a special mention to Kolkata Anandam for Equality and Justice. They are doing a very good job and they are promoting research works along with that. And so actually what I think that we need to build up some gender neutral space, gender neutral for everybody. Okay, like open recreational space with proper facility of light, surveillance, and other amenities. Less use of gender-related symbols, and like open space for like intellectual forums. Like Mohor Kunjo, provides that kind of a space, or Shobhumi, or Amra Adbhut Cafe is run by Jadavpur University students, which is a very good initiative where the LGBT community come and they can perform, they can talk. Okay. And the overall safety security of LGBT communities must be tightened by the police machinery because there are so many cases out there where they are harassed. Okay. And last of all, what I want to mention here that like sex education is a part of our regular curriculum for last few years, but we need the gender education, gender sensitization. We need to know about the social constructs of gender. Otherwise, if the change is not coming from within in our mentality, all these things are going to be very structural and from like an outside effort only. If we are not changing from inside, the society won't change because society is us. Society is made of us only. If we are changing, then society will eventually change somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Shupratim.
Thank you.
Yes,
thank you, Mr. Kormakar. The next presenter will be Debolina Mitra. The title of her paper is Section 377 and After, Exploring Issues of Rights and Inclusion of the LGBTQ+ community. Over to you, Ms. Guha.
Good afternoon. I would also want to share my screen. Is it visible and am I audible?
Yes.
Your voice is a bit weak.
Okay, what about now?
Yes, it's clear
Yes.
now.
Okay, and another thing, it's not going. Yeah, are my slides changing? Or is the first slide still visible?
I mean, this is the first slide and we can
Yeah,
see the title of your paper here.
And the next slides, they are not changing?
No, we haven't come to the next slide yet, I think.
Okay.
Please use the slideshow option.
Yeah, I'm using it, but it's not working. So I will rather just click the slides from here then. Now is it showing?
Yes, it is showing now.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. The queer movement is considered to be a part of the new social movements that have emerged since the mid-1960s in the West. Although a lot of studies have been conducted in the arena of social movements and queer activism in the Indian context, when I was doing my MPhil from IDSK in 2019, I found that most of these studies were carried out at a time when same-sex sexual activity was not yet decriminalized. An analysis of the queer movement after Section 377 IPC was read down on September 6, 2018, therefore seemed necessary. So in my dissertation, I had first analyzed the legal trajectory of the movement by looking at some of the significant judgments related to 377. Following this, I attempted to examine the new strategies and concerns that non-governmental organizations are thinking of adopting in order to take the movement forward. I undertook a qualitative research strategy for which I conducted in-depth interviews and took oral narratives of activists from two of the oldest organizations working on LGBTQ issues in Kolkata, that is Sappho for Equality and Varta Trust. I also interviewed a faculty member from a college in Kolkata who has been part of queer activism through pedagogical interventions. This paper is based on findings from this field work that I had carried out during early to mid 2019. During the interviews, different aspects of the queer movement were discussed, such as the significance of networking in the movement, raising awareness, the coming up of queer safe spaces in the city, the debate between same-sex marriage and civil unions, etc. In this paper, I am focusing on the quote-unquote queering of certain urban spaces that is occurring through or as a result of activism in the city, especially through the emergence of queer-friendly spaces like queer cafes, as Dr. Kormokar mentioned in his presentation, as well as academic spaces. For this, a quick look at the literature on geographies of sexualities is important. So Gavin Brown and Kath Brown observe that the idea of geographies of sexualities, especially for LGBTQ plus populations, varies significantly when it comes to the global north and the global south. Y.P. Dodderer writes that cities provide necessary spatial conditions for the formation of identity-based movements such as the LGBTQ movement, since urban life enables queer people to collectively organize themselves, become publicly visible, or to submerge themselves in anonymity. In a similar strain of thought, Swati Shah sheds light on the urban imaginary in the production of queer activism in India by analyzing the role of Indian cities in the anti-Section 377 movement. She explains that after the Supreme Court's judgment in 2019 that had recriminalized same-sex sexual activity, it was in metros like Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore where protests were organized, pointing at the use of city spaces in mobilizing a critique of state-sponsored violence, as well as the obstacles of using such spaces to consolidate the queer movement into a single unified struggle. Now, it is in several ways that the queer movement uses urban spaces, be it in the form of pride marches organized on the streets of cities or collective agitation through protests, as mentioned earlier. Similarly, post the striking down of 377, cities in India have witnessed the coming up of queer-friendly cafes and recreational spaces. Alum, Latham, and Jack Layton developed the concept of social infrastructure to draw attention to the importance of underappreciated public spaces like parks, libraries, and cafes in the collective public life of cities. Similarly, in cafe society, Graham Scambler observes that cafes act as an enabling sector of civil society where public agitation and arguments may originate, thereby spilling over to the protest sector of civil society in the form of organized movements. Now, the emergence of queer cafes in the city of Kolkata, such as Amra Adbhut Cafe, as mentioned by Dr. Kormokar in Jadupur 8B, and there is another cafe, Cafe 377 in Lord Sinha Road. These came up during the time of the striking down of Section 377. Now, spaces have their own politics and, in a way, feed the logistical aspects of activism as well. With regard to spatial politics, the target clientele also has a significant role to play. A location is also chosen on the basis of its potentialities with regard to calculated business decisions. The specificity of these locations where these cafes have come up is therefore interesting. These queer cafes can be understood to be taking a youth-friendly position and not targeting families as a regular client base. That the space is non-threatening and queer safe is probably the most important criteria in selecting a place. The opening of a queer cafe in a place like Jadavpur is therefore more logistical and pragmatic than, say, in a very stereotypically conservative North Kolkata neighborhood. Queer youth of a college or university may be potential customers of such cafes, and as we have seen that for Amra Adbhut Cafe, the Jadavpur University students are themselves they are running these cafes, and they are also part of the Jadavpur University Queer Collective. So these cafes are very near to their campus, and therefore this locational specificity also has its own advantage. Uh, a narrow lane behind 8B bus stand might be offering the non-threatening safe space necessary for the cafe to operate behind the gaze and staring of the other people. It can be noted here that business and activism therefore gets mixed in this, and it is a thing for concern of some of my interviewees. As a young activist of Sappho observes, uh, a commercialization of the LGBTQ people, this whole thing involves a certain kind of pink money influx. Now, the mainstream has understood that this money now needs to be brought into work. So, what they are trying to do is they are trying to be inclusive. But to me, this seems very commodified, because when the basic rights of the community are denied, then what is the point of going to a cafe by saying that it's a queer cafe? How do you make a difference? Of course, we would want that inclusivity is thought about, but if this inclusivity becomes very tokenistic, then it's a problem. Uh, Needless to say, this kind of pink capitalism exists side by side of long ingrained social cultural prejudices. Unless its roots are struck at, true rights of equality and dignity will remain a distant dream for the community in the midst of vested interests. It is also interesting to note how the idea of inclusivity is being thought about here in terms of exclusivity. These spaces cannot be unproblematically looked at as inclusive spaces because these are also maintaining the binaries of us and them. One thing, of course, is the idea of creating safe spaces where queer people would not be subjected to harassment. As a Sappho member enunciates, suppose a man who has beard on his face and he wears a sari. If they go and sit in any cafe, it is not necessary that they would have an ordinary experience. But if they visit that particular cafe, maybe they would be able to sit there without having to listen to any taunt. This is one side, but many people are opening these cafes thinking only about the commercial aspect to it. In such cases, we need to think whether it is correct. Again, a founding member of Varta Trust sheds light on this. He says that I think these are great initiatives. These are actually safe spaces where queer people can be themselves. They may even be able to earn a livelihood from these places, and these places also act as temporary shelters. In fact, I would be very interested in starting such a space myself. However, the fear of ghettoization remains, as a Sappho member has pointed out. This thought saddens me a bit, that why cannot I claim my place in a quote unquote general space? Why do I have to go to a different space for that? Does this mean that separate spaces for women, men, trans people, queer people, then I would say a separate cafe for lesbians, for gay men? Is it really going to work this way? This excerpt points at yet another disjunct and concern, whether it really is going to work this way. However, this idea that all activists need to come together with similar ideas and approaches need not necessarily be the movement's agenda in the first place. The movement players are aware that this is never possible, and it is through the intersection of diverse ideas and approaches that the movement is going to evolve and sustain itself. Another important issue that one needs to interrogate is how questions of homosociality and homosexuality get interlinked in this. A cafe is supposed to be a place for adda, an activist observes. Whatever my identity is, suppose you and I are both lesbian women. Does that necessarily mean that I will be comfortable only with you? That is not so, right? I may feel very comfortable. I may have a lot of fun chatting with a heterosexual person. So cafe is a space for chatting and relaxation. We are not doing activism there. To chat, I would rather sit with somebody who I am the most comfortable with. They may be queer, but they may also not be so. To me, it is important to keep that space open. Now, this excerpt critiques the idea that similar sexual orientation necessarily implies similar mindset or worldviews. This also directs at a separation of the categories of friendship, love, and sexuality in a way differentiating homosociality from homosexuality. However, the most intriguing part here is the way in which this excerpt separates these cafes from spaces of activism, that is, not an andolon korar jaiga or a place of protests for protests. This points at a contradiction because these spaces may not have been originally part of the activists' agenda, but they did ultimately come up through the course of activism. It is not necessary that spaces for activism only remain the roads and thoroughfares in the city along which the Pride March takes place. Even an everyday personal space like a cafe may become a political space nevertheless. A third significant aspect here is that this idea of separating spaces of activism and socialization may not hold true for the younger activists as much it is for the narrator of the above excerpt, who has been associated with the movement since its inception. Whether the senior and the junior players of the movement are flagging the same issues or concerns therefore seems important. And if the concerns continue to be different, whether this is going to lead to a fracture in the movement or, as mentioned earlier, is actually going to increase its potential for becoming more strengthened will be interesting to find out. A cafe, however, can never be enough. A beginning point to make other public spaces queer safe may be through interventions in spaces such as that of the sphere of education. Saha for Equality regularly undertakes awareness and sensitization programs in schools and colleges, arranges academic conferences, etc. A positive impact of the 2018 judgment is that earlier, SAFO had to approach these institutions for holding awareness programs, and now it is the other way around. Talking about the effects of SAFO's Sexuality Academy workshop, a member speaks of university professors in the following way. They themselves say that I had taunted a trans person at our university. Now I realize what a huge mistake I have made. Then they have created a queer-friendly space and have gone and apologized to those people. A college professor whom I have interviewed talks of his LGBTQ activism as majorly having taken place in the space of the classroom, which is a safe space, but also a space where people do not always talk about sexuality very openly. Although the college where he teaches follows the mainstream university syllabus, he has, with the support of the college administration, been able to include the queer question in the social movement and gender sections of the curriculum. Most of his intervention has therefore been pedagogical, and in that capacity, as he asserts, he has tried to train and talk to young minds on the issue as frankly as possible, raising these issues in the classroom without any hesitation. While teaching, he asserts, he has tried to not make the queer question into just a topic that needs to be finished as per the syllabus, but to try and make people genuinely think about it and engage with these issues. Conversing about queer issues in an educational space, whether to keep it as a part of the syllabus, publishing academic writings on it, or organizing awareness programs, all of this then become intermingled with activism in a way. These educational spaces may also be understood as spaces where youth from different socio-economic backgrounds come together, thereby pointing at an intersectional approach to activism that takes place here. There are a lot of colleges and universities in the city as well as the country where queer collectives are being formed by students. Examples would be, as I mentioned, the Jadavpur University Queer Collective in Kolkata, the Jamia Queer Collective, the Ambedkar University Queer Collective in Delhi, etc. Spaces of queer activism can therefore be observed to be spreading across conventional spaces such as the office of a non-governmental organization or the Pride Walk Road to queer cafes to spaces like university campuses, etc., thereby leading to an opening up of these spaces of activism so that it becomes easier for people from different strands of society to access these spaces. To conclude, we should therefore make sure that the queer movement does not get restricted to creating queer-friendly spaces in the forms of cafes and educational campuses, campus collectives only. Petra Doan states that in the field of public planning, LGBTQ plus issues are mostly ignored, and urban planners and policymakers should gain perspectives in order to improve lives of queer individuals in cities in terms of affordable housing, accessible health and social services, protection from discrimination and violence in workplaces, and so on. She opines that this is possible through active engagements with local activists and service providers. Queer collectives and NGOs may therefore act as a bridge between various state actors such as policymakers and city planners and the community to make urban as well as rural spaces accessible to the queer population in India. And
Thank you, Debolina.
this is my reference slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guha. The next presenter will be Mr. Shayandeep Paul, Ms. Rupsha Mondol, and Anindita Ghosh. The title of their paper is LGBT Movement in Indian Society. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to share my screen first. Is my screen visible to you all?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
My name is Rupsha Mandal, and I am a student of Vidyasagar College Geography Department. And the topic we are choosing is about the LGBT community. So why I am telling you about the LGBT community? Well, the objective of my presentation is to encourage you and to show you the position and the movement of LGBT people in Indian society. Let's start with human rights. So what is human rights? It means the right relating to life, liberty, equality, and dignity of individuals, which is guaranteed by the Constitution. Here are some applicability of human rights, which emphasizes that human rights should apply to all people. This means that no person should deny the exercise of their fundamental human rights because of the class, caste, sex, religion, discrimination, etc. But we can see violation or the disallowance of the freedom and thought and the moment of which all humans legally have a right. After that, we have to understand about the LGBT people. Who are they? From where the term came from? So we know that the term LGBT refers to homosexual people, but it is an umbrella term for all the categories, where L stands for lesbian, G stands for gay, B stands for bisexual, and T stands for transgender or the third gender. Other like I refers to intersex, and Q describes the homosexuality. Identity is one of the key variables in society that makes difference among people and groups. LGBT community in India faces this type of identity problems due to their sexual and gender inequality, which is beyond normative. It is a physiological or psychological disorder common in higher species of animals and human beings, which is not accepted by the society in general. Here I have discussed the position of LGBT people in ancient Indian society. This topic is not new. In India, sex, erotic love and desire have always existed and is cited our literature, sculpture and paintings. Like the Gandharvas found in the ancient India literature belongs to the gay community, also in Kannada, Santim, etc. On the other side, we can find Varuna and Mitra, the famously refers the same-sex couple in Rig Veda, and the character of Sikhandi exists in Mahabharata as also a transformed male character. We can find LGBT community in Mughal and also in colonial period. But these activities are not mentioned in Quran. Since LGBT people had different sexual orientation, they used to guard the Mughal harems. And in 19th century, church also supported mainly the homogeneous people groups. In India, transgender community comprised of Hijras, Kotis, Shiva Shakti, Aravanis, etc. However, when Indian subcontinent come under colonial rule during 19th century, British criminalized the Hijras community through various laws. Due to the attitude of British people that is intolerance against the homosexual arose in the Indian society. There are some ICC acts of our LGBT people like Section 377. So what is Section 377? It introduced in India in 1861 by British. It criminalized sexual activities against the order of nature. This model is based on Bravery Act 1533 of the British Parliament, where the punishment shall be with imprisonment for life or with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 10 years. According to NCRB in 2015, people were arrested under 377, including 207 minors and 10 women. Similarly, we can see the Act 389 and the other articles like 14, 15, and 21 are the rights to privacy and the protection of sexual orientation lied at the core of the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution. So I discussed about human rights and its violation, LGBT people and their position in ancient India, defense laws related to them, etc. There are some more things to discuss which will be presented shortly by my fellow partner Sandip Pal. So I am giving over to him. Please continue, Sandip.
Thank you, Rusha. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Let me present my screen first. Is my screen is visible to all?
Yes, it is.
Fine.
Yes.
So now we're gonna talk about the rise of the queer activism, mainly in post-colonial India. We observed that LGBTQ movement gained its limelight in the late 1990s, or specifically after 1994. It is mainly political evidence in Indian context tracked back to 1940s. Books, journal, and print media played an important role to accumulate those people. Ismat Chughai's short story Lihaf, the book is about the lesbian relationship written in 1940s. Shakuntala Devi's books, The World of Homosexuals, played a major role in the context. In this line, journal play a significant role. The first independent gay journal was Gay Scene was published from Kolkata. In the late 80s, a group of women desiring same-sex relation started emerging in India. The member of the Indian lesbian group joined many international conferences like Asian Lesbian Network, a conference in Bangkok. Indian women took part in Nairobi Women's Conference, etc., and other conferences all over the world. Savvy, a journal written by journalist Ashok Rao Kavi, a gay describing his own life story and discovering journey of third sexual orientation. Then came a high-profile marriage of two police women, Leela and Urmila, from the rural area of the Madhya Pradesh. Later, they were expelled from the police. Delhi-based lesbian network called Sakhi, formed by the Geeti Thadani and Bombay Dost LGBTQ magazine by Ashok Rao Kavi, helped in creation of new identities. Campaign for lesbian rights in 1997, Humgency Report in 1999, and People Union for Civil Rights speaks about the human rights of lesbian and gay people in many parts of India. In 1991, the first organizations, AIDS Vedva Virodhi Andolan, published a report named Less Than Gay, which was an account of the unfairness and inequity faced by the community in India. In 1994, AVVA filled a public interest in the turn down of Section 377, the first effort to legalize homosexuality in India. The first gay pride in 1999 parade was held in Kolkata called Calcutta Rainbow Pride, having only 50 members. The second, in the same year, we saw a manifesto named Lesbian Emergence by Celery. A South Delhi disco called Soul Kitchen hosted the first gay night in 1999. Then the National Hijra Haba was formed in 2012. Now we take a look how the art and culture, basically the film industry, raised their voice and show support in favor of the LGBT community. The book Lotus of Another Color by Rakesh Ratti played an important role in this movement. Bombay Gay was a short film made in 1996, was an Indian first gay film. Fire is yet another, a movie which depicted homosexual relationship between two women, was directed by Deepa Mehta. Coming to recent updated movies, Shubh Mangal Zyada Savdhan, starrer Ayushmann Khurrana and Jitendra Kumar, directed by Ritesh Kewala, is a comedy drama film following the romance between two men. Nagar Kirtan is another Indian Bengali film written and directed by Kaushik Ganguly, is a story of trans woman from rural Bengal and a flute player from the Kirtania in the town of Navadvip. Now we discussed what those issues faced by the LGBT peoples to bring their identities. First of all, the homosexual people were too afraid to bring their identity and their sexual orientation in front of the society. Even the families of the people were unaware of their orientation. As a result, the transgender person who came out of their families to join the NH community, they remained hidden. HIV rates among the third gender stands at 18% in Mumbai, while the rate among the wider population is only 0.3% because the doctor also denies to treat them. 90% students perceived as being LGBT are harassed in school. Jokes are usually made from friends, co-workers, or seniors. Physical violence is not an uncommon one in these days. Problems with applying for unemployment benefits, experiencing homelessness is some kind of the usual challenges faced by the LGBT peoples. We can see suicide rates are very high among these community groups because of the harassment. There are different groups like Safo Sakhi for an emotional support groups for LGBT people. Now there are the n number of movements, but the most popular are as follows by the NGOs. In Delhi, AIDS Vedva Virodhi Andolan was an NGO which was first challenged the act in Delhi High Court in 1994. The landmark year was 2001, where NGO NAS Foundation and the 1994 petition was dismissed. Then the NAS Foundation moves Supreme Court after High Court dismissed its petition in 2003. Only July 2nd, 2009, a two-judge bench of Delhi High Court finally accepted the petition and read down 377, declaring that the IPC so far criminalizes consensual sexual act of adults in private, is violative of Article 21, 14, and 15 of constitutions, effectively decriminalizing homosexuality. Now, what is the government reaction towards the modern age movement of LGBT community? In 2009, Delhi High Court declared Section 377 unconstitutional. In 2013, the Supreme Court again go through the Delhi High Court judgment and declared it legally unsustainable yet again. In 2014, National Legal Service Authority judgment, where Supreme Court directed center and states government to grant legal recognition of all individuals of gender status, male, female, and third gender. In 2017, a 9-bench judge of the Supreme Court recognized right to privacy as a fundamental right. We witnessed a mass mobilization against Section 377. An open letter by Vikram Sheth and Amartya Sen, who raised their voice that love cannot be criminalized. And the letter, co-signed by Shyam Benegal, Upendra Bakshi, Veena Das, and other famous persons, covered extensively by electronic and newsprint media. In the July 2018, finally, the Supreme Court declared homosexuality as an variation, not an aberration. This judgment is celebrated as historical success of the queer movement in India. Later in December 2018, the transgender bill was passed in Indian Parliament after 27 amendments. Along with it, NALSA judgment granted transgender individuals a right to self-identification. Now, in this context, the judgment of the Delhi High Court is most important. In a historic judgment, the Supreme Court on 7 September 2018 ruled that consensual adult gay sex is not a crime, saying sexual orientation is natural and people have no control over it. On 7 September, judgment here lands a new dawn of personal liberty and is a major victory for the LGBT community that has been fighting hard and resistantly to legalize gay sex. Consensual sex between adults in a private space, which is not harmful to women or children, cannot be denied as it is the matter of individual choice. Section 377 result in discrimination and is violative of constitutional principle, said the Supreme Court. The 5-judge Constitution bench, comprising the Chief Justice of India, Deepak Mishra, and the Justices R.F. Nariraman, A.M. Khanwalekar, D.Y. Chandrachud, and Indu Malhotra, was unanimous in its decision. Section 377 is irrational, arbitrary, and incomprehensively as it fetters the right to equality for LGBT community, possesses the same equality as the other citizen, said the Chief Justice of India, Deepak Mishra. The division bench also added, the moment there is a finding that a provision violates the fundamental rights of citizens, the court has a power to strike it down irrespective of the majority-run government's power to repeal, amend, or enact law. It is for us to strike down the moment something violates fundamental rights, said back in July. SC changes its decision by legalizing LGBT activity in India then, because of the heavy movement of LGBT community. So it's the time for celebration of the LGBT people. After the Supreme Court judgment, the movement today has become much more visible due to different pride parades and meetings being organized in different parts of country, online communities being fostered by the activities in the both metropolis and suburban towns, advertisement being put up using LGBTQ concept. Chaudhuri argues that neoliberalism, which made a huge impression in the realm of gender, is also visible in the queer community. Ashleigh Tellis goes a step further to argue that queers have been evolved into the entrepreneurial and consumptive citizen. This has resulted in elite gay men becoming the privileged customer of the pink tourism. Kolkata's cafe, #377, opened its door with the masses of the equality and unity. Sorry. Amra Adbhut Cafe in Kolkata, operating as a space of hosting pop-ups and events for queer people. Mumbai witnessed its 11th Pride Parade on 22nd February 2019, largest Pride March yet after the 2018 judgment. Around 15,000 participants of Mumbai's LGBTQ community and also visitors from the other parts of the country celebrates the SC judgment. Now, let's see how the today's society behave with them. India's society is a traditional, multicultural, diversified, integrated society wherein Hindus dominates. And it's a long way heterosexual marriage established in this society. This is supported by the Vishwa Hindu Parishad Party. Many other label it as a disease to be cured, an abnormality to be set right, and a crime to be punished. Sexual minorities in India are largely stigmatized and disempowered socially, culturally, politically, and often legally and economically, to say the Ashok Rao Kavi. Gays are beaten up and even raped under the cloak of his law, says gay rights activist Rakesh Salim. So the society is divided into the two forms, the positive one and the negative one. The Vishwa Hindu Parishad Vice President Om Prakash Singhal said, "This is the right decision, we welcome it." The Minister of the Health and Family Welfare opposed the upholding of Section 370, argued that the law had been used to harass HIV/AIDS prevention efforts. In 2008, a judge of the Bombay High Court also called for the scrapping of the law. So this is a positive reaction. So coming forward to the negative one, Mr. Rajnath Singh, the former Home Minister, stated that we supported Section 377 because we believe that homosexuality is an unnatural act and cannot be supported. In 2008, Additional General P.P. Malhotra said homosexuality is a social vice and the state has a power to contain it. So in a conclusionary part, so what we should be our view towards the homosexuality people or the homosexuality society? If if I am asked that towards the homosexuality community and activity, then we will tell that if we believed in God and also believe that human beings are created by God, then we have to also believe that peoples belong to homosexuality are also created by God. If we say ourselves is normal, then we have to recognize them also normal. We should give their own space and own legal rights instead of reject them and making them lonely. We are requested to those parents whose child belongs to homosexual community, treat them like a normal child instead of torturing them and making them isolated. Out of this rejection towards their parents and loved one, they might attempt suicide. And the cases are very much high in Kolkata and in metro town. Homosexual is not a crime and not a mental disorder. So without neglecting them, be a proud parents of your children. So we are supporting homosexual activity from core of our heart and wishing their all prosperity in their future ahead. So that is my end of my presentation. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you to the three presenters. Now we shall look into the questions which have been put forward by the audience. The first question is for Dr. Jhikmik Kar, and it has been asked by Ms. Moumita Kanjilal. She says, you mentioned that the LGBT community feels safe at Nandan area in Kolkata. Is there any specific reason for that apart from just their choice?
Yes, it is the choice, but there are some parameters. There are some rationalities behind that. First of all, Nandan and Ranushadan is quite, it takes a quite central location. It is geographically, it is very well connected from Kolkata and the surrounding urban centers or surrounding areas of Kolkata, like South 24 Parganas or North 24 Parganas, and every Sunday, not only the Kolkata people go there, but the community people come from outside also. So it is very much accessible. The accessibility is very high for Nandan and Southern area. And apart from that, as we know that it can be one of the cultural, cultural hearts of Kolkata, it's the cultural heart. So the cultural background is very strong, and if you look at the space, if you ever been in Rabindra Sadan and Nandan area, the surrounding area is very gender neutral. It's open space. There are lots of space where people can sit for hours and hours. You don't have to pay any kind of you don't have to pay any price. You can sit over there up to from morning 7 to at night 9. So it's very gender neutral. It's open air. There is no restrictions. There is no boundary. It feels very good. It feels there's a free flowing thing over there. The environment is very good, and locationally it was like a central location. It's accessible by all kind of like metros, train, buses, everything. It's very much accessible, and by security and safety, it's very important because the area is under the government jurisdiction. The area, the Rabindra Sadan and Nandan both are government organizations, so the safety and security is very high, and it is just beside the modern police station. So the safety security is already there. So for that kind of a central location, it is quite rational to choose that kind of a place, and the cultural thing is also very important, and the gender neutral nature of that space. I think those are the parameters which drive them to choose that area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. It is true that we need such kinds of gender neutral spaces for the
Yes.
LGBTQ community. I'll go on to the next question. Thank you, sir. I'll go to the next question. The next question has been asked by Mrs. Anindita Ghosh. This is a question to Debolina. She asked, do you think that the LGBT cafes which are coming up is a safe place where these people can interact safely with whoever they want to?
Yes, ma'am. These are considered to be safe places where they can interact because we know that they are taunted and everything in family, sometimes by their peers and friends in colleges. So having assigned specific cafes for them is of course something that makes them feel comfortable. But as many of my interviewees have actually said that as Dr. Kormukar has also talked about spatial restriction. So my interviewees have also feared that is it going to create only restrictive spaces for the community, because of course it is important at first for such spaces to come up, but then what about the larger society and other urban spaces accommodating the queer community? What happens to that? And another issue that they will of course feel safe in these queer cafes, but if what about people who they are comfortable with speaking, who are not queer people? But the assignment of the name such as a queer cafe will restrict other people who are not queer from entering these cafes in a way. So these are some of the things that my interviewees have talked about. But of course, overall, these are important for the community to make them feel safe.
Right. So more inclusivity is what we want, therefore. So that the LGBTQ community, they do not feel isolated or excluded, right?
Yes.
So with this, we end our first technical session. There are no more questions. So I would like to request the chairperson, Professor Shutapa Saha, to say a few words to conclude the session. Ma'am, if you please.
Thank you. And is there any time constraint? Now,
No, ma'am, there's no time
few,
constraint.
few minutes. I mean, all these three papers, they were very interesting and enriching. I'll start commenting on the third presentation first, which was made by Shayandeep Paul and Rupsha Mandal, and they have talked about LGBT movement in Indian society and also fundamental human rights and violation of freedom and rights. LGBT, they have talked about it as an umbrella term, and also talked about the identity of human beings, and they delve deep into the historical root of LGBT community and their sexual orientation, and also the movement which is going on right at this moment. And I think I have to congratulate Professor Anindita Ghosh if I'm not mistaken, who has guided them to prepare this paper. Now, I feel it's really encouraging to know that they are now getting ready to sensitize others. And then I'll come to the paper which Dr. Tuhin Kanti has presented, and where he has talked about this marginalization that comes from the norms of heteronormativity, which creates a power relationship and has ostracized by the society after that so much that they had to commit suicide. You know, I don't remember the year, but I mean, such a cruel incident, I mean, had taken place. And you also have, I mean, Tuhin also has talked about meeting a few gender non-conforming people who are not very vocal about themselves and who tend to be very suppressive. And he also has given statistics of that. So impact on the pride of the family, which was their main concern, and who got subjected to verbal and physical abuse and who were forced to accept heteronormativity, you know, as expected by society. And you have also talked about gender neutral spaces like cafes and other areas where these people, this community, they feel comfortable in, and where certain subcultures have been created by themselves, you know, for their own convenience. And you also have said that both sex education and gender sensitization, both are necessary at the same time. Then I'll come to the second presentation by Debolina, who has talked almost in the same line, just like Tuhin Kanti, but also has raised some questions. I mean, she has talked about the post-repealing time of Section 377 and after, and the findings from her field work with various NGOs, and she has talked about raising awareness, and she also has talked about queer-friendly spaces as well as academic spaces but she has raised a question, you know, she has raised a question about the business and where business and activism, they are getting interlinked. She has also talked about the pink money and question regarding exclusivity which lies underneath the desire for inclusivity. So a kind of ghettoism, you know, ghettoization, which really, I mean, she has raised this question whether it is really going to work. So, I mean, and she has interlinked homosociality with homosexuality. So all these three papers, they have helped us to understand the complex and intersectional nature of queer marginalization in urban space today, situated within multiple modes of social and spatial oppression. And I think all the three papers, they were very, very interesting and well written and well presented also. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your kind words and for summing it up so well. With this, we come to the end of the first day of the webinar. On behalf of the Department of Geography, Vidyasagar College, Kolkata, I thank all the resource persons, faculty members, the participants, and the audience for joining us today. Our webinar shall continue tomorrow, as usual, from 11 a.m. All participants are requested to use their respective Google Meet links, as has been mentioned in the email. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much.